My name is Trisa, and I have just turned 18-year-old. I decided to tell a story, but it is not just any story. It is my story and what had happened to my family and me. I was born and raised in Skopje. I live with my two beautiful parents and my little brother Troji. Troji is only 1 year younger than me, but he still acts like a bit of a child and annoys me. I've always wanted a sister, and my parents tried for another baby, but I guess it is meant to be just Troji and me. But I don't complain because my mother is like a sister to me. Troji and I had an amazing childhood. It was so good growing up with our grandparents. They both had passed away this year from COVID. It doesn't go a day that I don't think about them. I miss them so much. But our lives have always been good. My parents worked so hard for the life that we have now. My father is an anesthesiologist, and he makes pretty good money from it. I heard that it is the highest paying job in the world. My mother, on the other hand, is a teacher. Everyone loves her. Well, who couldn't love her? She is the kindest and most loving. Even though my parents have completely different lives, they still manage to understand each other and love each other since day one. I have just graduated from high school, and I am very excited about what will happen next in my life. High school wasn't the best experience, and I am so glad that it is over. Life has become exactly like in the movies. I could hardly find a good friendship at my high school since everyone is so mean nowadays. But now, we had just welcomed my favorite season ever, summer. And life is just good. I love summer. The days get longer and warmer, and life generally becomes better. Since my parents work all the time, and my brother and I are at school. The only chance to go somewhere as a family is during summer. We always go with our cousins. It's always fun because they have 3 daughters. During vacations, you need to have someone that you have fun with. I can't have fun with my brother. He wants different things. He is a boy. But this summer our cousins couldn't come with us. I was so sad and angry when I heard about this. At first, I didn't want to go at all, but it was summer, and I had to make the most of it. So we decided to have a vacation. We decided on going to Italy, Amalfi Coast. Italy has always been a dream of all of us. We decided that we would go by car. And that's what we did. There was a long road ahead of us. Troji and I were sitting in the back seat of the car. I got my snacks and my headphones. My obsession right now is a rock band called Arctic Monkeys. Troji would always take my headphones and make my music stop, and this way. We would fight a bit. It was a long road trip with fights and laughs. We would make stops here and there until we arrived at our destination. And here it was, the famous Amalfi Coast. It looked better than the pictures. We decided to stay at a hotel that was near the beach and away from the city. There were a lot of tourists, and we needed some peaceful time. The hotel was very luxurious, and we all had a room to ourselves. But we shared a living room, and it was more like an apartment rather than a hotel. The view from my balcony was crazy. You could see the whole ocean. You could scream all you want, but no one would hear you. But that day we were so tired, we decided to sleep so we could be more energetic and enjoy the day the next day. The next day arrived, and we were so excited. I put on my favorite bikini and was ready to take a tan. We decided to stay by the beach. I love napping on the beach, it's just so peaceful. We didn't do much during the daytime. In the evening we decided to go and have some dinner. We wanted to go to places that weren't so near to our hotel, so we had to go by car. But it was only an 8-minute car ride or something. We arrived, and there were a lot of tourists. You could literally be lost in there. I was holding my mother's hand like I was only a 10-year-old. We ate dinner that night and then went back to our hotel and fell asleep. I wish we didn't get back to our hotel. I wish we didn't sleep. We did our thing, not knowing that something terrible was going to happen the next day. My alarm clock woke me up in the morning because we always wake up early during vacation. It was almost 7 a.m. I decided to sleep a little bit more, knowing well that my mother would wake me up. I slept and realized that nobody had come to my room to wake me up. I looked at the clock, and it was 8 a.m. There were no missed calls and no messages. I took my phone, just like I always do in the mornings. And I started scrolling. I noticed that the Wi-Fi wasn't working. I was surprised how this luxurious apartment had problems with Wi-Fi. I decided to go to the other rooms and wake my parents and my brother. Maybe they had missed the alarm, I thought. But I couldn't open the door. The door is locked. Some minutes went by, and I didn't panic at all until I heard someone begging the door. It was Mom, Dad, and my brother. Their rooms had been locked too. We could barely hear each other, but we were trying so hard to communicate. Their Wi-Fi and their phone weren't working. There was no signal. It had been 3 hours, and no one was coming to help us. Even our balcony door was blocked and couldn't get opened. Hours went by, and we were getting hungry and worried. My brother and I were in separate rooms. My parents were so worried that something terrible was going to happen. My dad couldn't stop a second without banging the door. Then all of a sudden, we heard a noise. Someone came into the apartment and was walking around the living room. I could hear the steps. Then all of a sudden, a room got opened. It was my parents' room. Someone just went inside our parents' room, and our parents immediately started screaming. I was so scared something bad had happened to them. I could hear them talking, but I couldn't hear clearly. Then that person went out of the apartment. And I screamed, "Are you all right?" Luckily my parents answered, and they said that someone had just come to their room. They said that that person had a mask on, and they couldn't see who it was. That person had asked my parents for a big amount of money. Money was never an issue for my parents, so of course, they agreed to give the money. We noticed that my brother, Troji, was not talking at all as we were talking. We were screaming his name, but he was not answering. It had been hours, and we were so worried. I couldn't help but cry. Then that dangerous stranger came into the apartment again and told us loudly that they had taken Troji and would not bring him back unless they saw the amount of money they had asked for. They left us only one boiled egg, just so we could starve. That day was one of the most challenging days that I have ever experienced. I was so scared of Troji and where he was. My parents were crying non-stop. I wanted to hug them and tell them that everything is going to be all right. I fell asleep crying, and then I woke up by the noise of the door of the apartment. That guy had come back and gone to my parents' room and took my dad. They took my dad so he could withdraw money from the bank and give it to them. My dad tried to ask for help on the street, but the guy said to him that if he tried to do something stupid, they would kill him. My dad got even more worried now and said that he would not give the money unless he saw Troji. But they said to him that Troji was going to be waiting in the apartment and that we were good to go and free. But my dad came back, and Troji wasn't there. We were all so stressed, and I hadn't gotten out of the room for 2 days now. There was a lot of questions running through our mind. Who are they? How did they know that we were here and that my father was rich? Is it someone we know? I know that I said that Troji is annoying and that I hated him, but he is still my little brother. And I care about him. I missed his stupid voice and our stupid little fights. Another night had come, and we all fell asleep. I woke up in the morning and noticed that my room door was opened. I ran so fast like a kid on Christmas Day. I ran so fast to my parents' room to see if they were all right. They were sleeping. I woke up them hugging so hard. We were happy that we were together, at least. But our little Troji wasn't there yet. We ran to see if the door of the apartment had been opened. But, no. It was still closed. My dad tried to find ways so that we could escape. But, nothing was near us. No houses. No restaurants. Then it hit us that it would be better if we just stayed and waited. They could bring Troji anytime now. After some hours, a car pulled to the apartment. We took a look from the window and noticed that Troji was there. We were so happy. He came running into the apartment and had a key. He opened the door of our apartment. That was the first time that I hugged Troji. He explained to us everything that had happened to him. He said that the guys took him and held him in a house. He said that they didn't do anything bad to him. Then, we went to the person who owned the apartment and told them about everything that had happened to us. We decided to look at the cameras and see if we could find the suspects. We noticed that there were 2 guys, and one of them had no masks on. The police then had identified the suspect and then arrested him. Apparently, the guy was a tourist, and he just wanted to make some extra money. He didn't know who we were or where we were from. He had followed us that night that we went out. I am writing this while we are going on our way home. Our vacation had turned into a nightmare, and we couldn't get our money back. But we didn't care. We were glad that we were all right and together. We just wanted to get home safe. It's crazy what people do for money, and they are capable of putting lives in danger. This experience made me realize that anything can happen in a very unpredictable way. This experience didn't make me love Italy less. It was just bad timing. I can't wait to visit it again.
My name is Mona, and I am only 15-year-old. I was born and raised in the capital of Greece, Athens. I have lived only with my 2 beautiful parents all of my life. I am an only child, and I love it. I feel special and spoiled all the time. The city where I live, Athens, really inspires me. Even though I am only 15-year-old, I am a very romantic person. I romanticize everything. So, it is effortless living in my city, Athens. My city is very interestingly beautiful and romantic. It is blessed with a rich cultural and historical past. But I am not here to talk about my city. Unlike other kids, I love going to school. I enjoy reading books in my free time. My favorite subject at my school is creative writing, and our teacher gave us an exciting thing to do at home. He said that we should write the most beautiful love story that had happened to us. The problem is that I don't have a love story. I've had my first kiss and some little dates, but that doesn't count as a love story. It's hard to have a genuine relationship at 15-year-old. I don't think my teacher doesn't understand today's relationships. I spend hours and hours thinking about what to write. I want a good grade, so should I lie? But I can't lie, all of my friends would know. Then it hit me, since I don't have a love story yet, I might just write about the most beautiful love story that I've ever heard. Which was my parents' story. My parents are my inspiration. They have been married for 15 years. How did they meet? What's the secret of a long, healthy marriage? Let's find out. The story takes place years ago in Athens, when life was nothing like today. Life was easier and simpler. People really loved each other. There was no social media, no apps where you could swipe into someone's profile and go on a date with them. No, back in the old days, you had to fight to find a partner. At least that's what my parents have told me. There was a girl who only at 19-year-old had become a cop. And there was a boy who worked at a jewelry store that his father had owned. These two had lived a completely different life. The girl had come from a rigorous family, and the only reason she became a cop was that her mother was a cop too. The girl had always lived by rules and tried her best to be an excellent daughter and woman. But, on the other hand, the boy was rebellious. He was a bad boy, and the girls seemed to like that. All the girls loved him. These two lived so near each other but never met. Until one day, one lucky day, these two would run into each other, not knowing that their lives would change forever. The boy was working in his jewelry store when the girl came in. She was tall and had long blonde hair. She had a beautiful, shy smile. The girl in her police uniform got the boy all speechless. She was looking to get something for herself. It was her birthday. The boy made the first move, saying that she needed to pay since it was her birthday. But she insisted on paying, and she did. The boy wanted to know who she was. He saw her name on her uniform. Her name was Anna. But he didn't know where she lived. The boy wanted to know where this girl lived. The girl seemed like a very serious type of girl, nothing like the boy dealt with. She didn't give him a chance even to talk or ask anything. The girl didn't even look at his face. He asked around for the girl's name that he saw on her uniform. He found out that she lived so near his house. He was surprised how they didn't meet up until that day. But the boy got informed that Anna had very strict parents, and she rarely goes out. That would be a big problem for the boy. He would sometimes go by her house and spend hours in her neighborhood but never see her. The boy was used to all the girls being crazy about him, and he was used to getting any girl he wanted. A lot of girls come to his jewelry store just to see him. Anna was different. That's why the boy was curious about her. The boy couldn't stop talking about Anna to his friends. None of his friends knew her, but they always used to say that he shouldn't mess with her because her whole family worked in the police. They used to say that they were one crazy family. The boy decided to back up since he didn't find any solutions to meet her and talk to her. He talked to other girls during that time, but the curiosity never left. One day as he was walking home, he came across Anna. He was surprised. He went and talked to her and asked about how her birthday had gone. The first thing that she said was, "Who are you?" The boy was surprised, because everybody knew his name and who he was. The boy got humbled there. "My name is Sokol," he said surprisingly. As the boy was talking to her, Anna seemed very worried. She couldn't stop looking left and right. Sokol had asked her if there was anything wrong. "Anna has said that she is scared if her parents would see her with me." She said they don't like it if she hangs out with any boy. Sokol said, not even friends? She said no, and started walking home, saying that he needed to leave her alone. Sokol felt bad for her. She was so young, and she was not enjoying life at all. Months went by, and Sokol had almost forgotten Anna's face. It was summertime, and everyone was out except her. One day as he was about to close the jewelry store, his father said, "Don't forget to put the alarm on." So, an idea came to his mind. He couldn't wait to get to work tomorrow and master his genius idea. Tomorrow came. The plan was that he should break the window of his jewelry store, and this way, the alarm would go on, and the police would come. And guess who works in the police? Anna. It was the only way that these two would meet. And that's what Sokol did. He closed the shop. He broke the window and started running home, acting like he had nothing to do with it. While he was staying home stressed, a phone call occurred. Sokol's father got the news and immediately went. Sokol went too. And there she was, Anna. She looked so beautiful and brave. Sokol was acting like he didn't know who did it and saying that he would beat up whoever did this. They stayed there for hours, trying to figure out who did it. This way they had the chance to talk with each other. Sokol could feel that Anna was starting to feel safe with him. But nothing more happened. They were back to their old ways, barely seeing each other anymore. After some weeks, Sokol had heard some bad news. People were talking and saying that Anna's family had found her a husband to marry. Sokol couldn't believe his ears. She was so young to get married, plus Sokol wanted to get to know her more. He felt like they could be together. So, Sokol tried to do his master plan once again. Maybe this time, it would work. It was night time, and he had finished his shift. This time he decided to take an expensive necklace, just so the story would be more believable. He took a stone and broke the window, and started running home as usual. He went home, and his father was already out. So he went with his father. After some minutes, the police arrived. And Anna was smiling, saying, "Again?" They still couldn't find who did that, but Sokol and Anna were talking non-stop with each other. Sokol tried to put his guard down and ask her straightforward about the rumors that she was going to get married. But she said that the rumors were fake. Sokol felt so happy, and he couldn't stop smiling. He went home feeling relieved. But Sokol didn't give up. He wanted to get to know her more and see her more. One day, he decided to go near her house and just see if she would come out or something. But Sokol saw something that he wished he didn't see. A guy was walking Anna home. Sokol hid somewhere so they wouldn't see him. That guy was a cop too, and they seemed to love each other's company. There were a million questions around his mind. Who was he? Anna said that her parents didn't let her hang out with a boy. Why was she? Is he the guy that people were rumoring about? At that moment, Sokol felt like he should give up and move on with his life. But he wanted to know why she lied to him about her not getting married. She was obviously with a guy, plus he was walking her home. Sokol felt like he had turned into a psychopath and a stalker. Because once again, he thought that his master plan should go on one more time. He did the usual thing. He broke the window and hoped for the better. His father got the news once again. But Sokol felt so bad when his father got the news. They were already spending a lot of money repairing the damages that Sokol was doing. Sokol decided that this would be the last time he would do that. The police came together with Anna. This time they were suspicious about this happening over and over again. They were finding it weird how every time this was happening when Sokol was working. But Sokol played it off like once again he didn't know what had happened. This time Sokol didn't have much time to ask Anna the questions he had. They barely talked. Sokol felt so down. He did all of this for nothing. Sokol's father had decided that he would be the one working all the time and that he would be working during the night too. Sokol felt hopeless. The following day, Sokol was sleeping when his mother had called him saying that someone was looking for him. He woke up and got dressed, whatever he could put on. It was Anna. He couldn't believe his eyes. She said that she wanted to talk with him. So that's what they did. The first thing she said was, "Why did you keep doing this?" She said that she knew that Sokol was the one breaking the windows. Sokol was speechless. She said that it was obvious that he did that, and she wanted to know the reason why. She said that she didn't want to tell Sokol's father because she believed that Sokol had a strong reason. Sokol knew that he had no other choice but just tell the truth. He said to her that she was the reason why he was doing all of this. She was surprised. Sokol said that he wanted to spend time and get to know her, but he couldn't. He told her that he liked her. He asked her if she liked him too and wanted to go out with him. What was her answer? What happened next? Well, they had me. So you might know how the rest of the story goes. They fell in love and spent the rest of their lives together. This is my favorite love story that I've ever heard because I admire how my father never gave up on my mother. Marriage and relationships can be hard, but you shouldn't give up on love. I envy my parents because nowadays nobody fights for love.
I am Flutura, and just like everyone else, I have imperfections too. Yesterday I turned 16-year-old, and someone special had gifted me this diary. So I decided to write. People say that the best years of your life are the teenage years. But what they don't know is that life can be both beautiful and challenging at the same time. It's so hard to live your life when you aren't satisfied with yourself or when you don't feel comfortable in your skin. I've had a hard time with myself since I can even remember. My parents had named me Flutura for a reason. Flutura, in my language, means butterfly. The plan was not on naming me Flutura, but something had happened. I was born. My parents were so happy when I was born. I was the first child. I was healthy and chubby, just like every other perfect baby, except for one thing. I was born with a scar on my face, on the left side. When I was born, my parents were surprised and noticed that the scar looked just like a butterfly. And that's why they decided on naming me Flutura. My scar has always been my biggest insecurity. I remember how I always asked questions about how I was the only one with that scar. Even my parents hated this fact because there weren't many pictures of me when I was a baby. They don't show it, but that's what I think. After some years, something good had happened in our family. We had welcomed another baby, a baby girl. I was so young, but I remember I was so excited to have a baby sister. My parents were excited too. My baby sister turned out to be so perfect. No scars, no nothing. I remember I was so jealous. But I still am. The jealousy never faded away to this day. But still, our childhood was perfect. We lived in Pristina all of our lives. It was just me, my parents, and my little sister. However, I didn't know that my childhood would be the easy part of my life. I grew up, and the insecurity grew up with me. My friends would ask me about my scar. What had happened? What is that? Can you remove it? Why is it black? The question always made me feel bad about myself. It made me feel like I didn't belong there and that I was different. So, I tried to hide it. I never tied my hair up. When I was younger, I did a hairstyle to hide my scar, and it was embarrassing. I put all of my hair on my left side. My parents used to talk to me and make me feel better, but that wasn't enough. All of my friends are active on social media. They post pics of their face, their body, and outfits. But I just can't do that. All of my photos are only on my right side. My social media had become boring, so I had to close them. I started high school, and life has become even harder. I started doing makeup to hide my scar. I woke up extra early because my makeup took me 1 hour. But it's worth it. I feel normal, just like everyone else. All of my friends have had their first kiss, and they don't believe me when I say that I still didn't yet. I am not confident enough to let someone touch my face, put their hands on my hair, and kiss me. I am not confident because I have constantly been bullied and left behind. People would stare at me in public like I am an alien. Sometimes I just want to yell at them and say, "What are you looking at?" But life is easier for me during winter. I love winter. I love wearing a hat and a scarf, and this way, my scar is not even noticeable. But one day, something had happened. It was a snowy day, and I could barely see. I was walking home from school, and I was alone. The road was icy, and I didn't know I fell on the ground so bad that I apparently fainted. I didn't even know what had happened that day until I woke up at the hospital. I didn't have my scarf on me, and my hair was up. There was a boy there. I didn't know who he was. I had never seen him before. He looked like he was the same age as me. Apparently, he was the one that saw me falling, and he helped me. The doctor had called my parents and said that they would be there in a minute. But I didn't care about that. I was just searching for my scarf so nobody would have seen my scar. But that was too late. He had seen my scar, but it didn't seem like he cared. He still was looking at me like I was a normal person. I thanked him for saving me, and then he left without even telling me his name. My parents came to get me, so we went home. The very next day, in the same place as I had fallen, the guy that helped me was there. I thought that maybe that's where he lived. I acted as if I was not seeing him, but he was looking at me. I was so glad that I had my scarf on and that he would not see my scar. He started walking towards me and said, "Hi, do you remember me?" I said yes. He said that he wanted to make sure that I wouldn't fall again. But that was just his excuse to see me again. But why would he want to see me again? He said that he wanted to meet up with me so we could get to know each other. We decided on a date for the next day. I was so excited and scared at the same time. I could barely sleep that night. The day of the date came so fast. I tried to look my best. I put on as much makeup as I could so my scar wouldn't be noticeable. And I would look beautiful. We met up, even though we still didn't know each other's names. His name is Leon. The first thing he said to me was, "Why did you put on so much makeup?" He said that he liked me more without makeup. And nobody has said this to me before. It felt good. I felt beautiful around him. But Leon doesn't live around here. He has been at his uncle's for some months. The date went very well, and I learned a lot about him. I got his number, and he had been texting me non-stop. At first, I didn't want to tell my sisters or my friends about this date. God knows what can happen next. I don't want to jinx it. But, after some days of our date, as I was walking out of school, Leon was waiting for me. He didn't tell me that he was going to come. He wanted it to be a surprise. It was a surprise indeed, a good one. But I felt terrible since my friends didn't know a thing. They were so confused. But I told them that I'd explain to them everything and went on the next date with Leon. We went to this sushi place. I had never tried sushi before, but I liked it. When I am around him, I forget that I have a scar. He didn't even ask about it like it didn't exist. I wanted to be the first one to talk about it and just get over it, but I couldn't. I have never had a boyfriend before. The scar was always getting in my way. It's not that boys didn't love me because of my scar. It is just that I am never confident enough to let anyone love me. The next day, I decided to tell my friends about Leon. They had already seen him the other day. I owe them an explanation, even though we are not dating or anything. We meet up, and I hug them and start talking like usual. But I immediately felt like a cold vibe, like something wasn't all right. I asked them, "What's wrong?" They were so rude to me all of a sudden, saying, "You weren't going to tell us that you have a boyfriend." But I told them that Leon is not my boyfriend, he is just a friend. They didn't believe me. They were saying that I was not good enough for Leon and that he would leave me and be all alone. "Did he even see your scar?" they said. "How could he love you like that?" I couldn't even say anything. My heart was broken into pieces. I went home that day, and I couldn't figure out why my two best friends were acting that way. Was it jealousy? Because they are dying to have a boyfriend right now. Plus, Leon is so handsome, tall, and funny. He is just perfect. I always was the one that heard their endless stories about their first kisses, their first dates, and so on. I never got to say those things. And I was never jealous. I was happy for them. But was it true? All of the words they were saying. Maybe it's the truth that Leon would never want to date me. Maybe he just wanted a friend since he doesn't have who to stay with at this uncle's house. There were a lot of thoughts running through my mind. I couldn't help but cry all night. I felt so low and ugly. How can your own best friend make you feel so ugly? I was stupid to think that Leon would be into me. Leon was texting me non-stop that night, but I decided to not reply. I didn't want to talk to him anymore, and maybe it was for the best. I didn't want my heart to be broken. It had been 2 days since I hadn't gone to school, and I didn't reply to any of Leon's messages. I didn't want to see anyone, and my parents understood me even though I didn't tell them any reasons. But I couldn't miss school all my life. I didn't want to walk to school because I was afraid that I would run onto Leon. So my mother drove me to school. When I arrived at school, Leon was there. He came there only to tell me so we could meet after school since I wasn't replying to his messages. So that's what we did. We had a date after school. But for then, I had to go to my classes. There were my best friends there. I didn't want to talk to them, but they insisted. They told me how bad they felt and that they didn't mean any of the words that they said. But I couldn't forgive them. They attacked me in my biggest insecurity. I told them that I needed time to decide if I wanted to talk to them or not. The school was over for that day, and it was time for me and Leon to meet. When we met, he hugged me so tight and so long. I was surprised. He told me how much he missed me and how he wondered why I wasn't replying to him back. My voice was shaking, but I told him exactly what had happened. I could tell that he felt sorry for me, but I didn't want that. I don't want people to feel sorry for me. He put my hair away and looked at me. He came closer to me and kissed my scar. And then he kissed my lips. He asked me to be his girlfriend, and I had never felt so beautiful. During this time with Leon, I had realized that imperfections are beautiful and that the right people can make you feel so loved. That's what Leon did. He made me feel beautiful as I should. He gave me this diary so I could write about the things that make me sad, and he said that after I write them down, they won't feel as important as I would think. This helped me a lot. I have been talking with my best friends too because now no one can make me feel not beautiful. I feel beautiful, and that's what matters.
My name is Hira, and I just wanted to share some pieces of my life. Because, why not? I have just turned 18-year-old. Everyone says that the teenage years are the best years of your life. It's the time when you grow while making mistakes, and I believe that. I come from the capital city of Kosovo, Pristina. My city has changed a lot in recent years. People are getting more open-minded, and I like that. People are dating whoever they want, doing whatever they want. My mother always says that women suffered a lot back in the old days and never raised their voices. But, now, it's different. Women don't tolerate anymore, and that's how it should be. Pristina is a great city to grow in. I wouldn't change my hometown for anything in the world. There is so much to do and see. So many little coffee shops where you can enjoy the day. The nightlife is crazy too. My house is in the center of the city. You can see the whole city from it. The views are breathtaking, especially during sunsets. We have this little balcony where I spent almost all my time there. I live with my parents, sister, and our chubby golden retriever puppy, Buna. My parents both work as teachers. They have the same personality, and sometimes we think that they are one person. I have never seen a love like theirs. My dad always wanted to have a son. But I am glad that we don't have a brother. All of my friends that have brothers complain. They say that they get very overprotective even when they shouldn't be. They can be jealous over what to wear and where to go to. I would hate it if someone controlled me and told me what to wear. I was raised not to be controlled by anyone. I love my freedom, and my parents have always respected it. This year is my last year of high school. I will graduate soon. My experience in high school has been very easy for me. I am saying this because I feel like it is not the same for everybody. There are times when I witness people getting bullied over simple things, and I always try to stand up for them. But I think that our school and our teachers are the ones to blame. They don't care about what happens. They just take their money and go, no matter how destroyed your mental health is. Like everyone else, I have been in a bad mental health state too. I have just ended a 2-year relationship. 2 years ago, I was a completely different person. I fell in love. I fell in love with a boy called Roan. He loved me too. We were so young and dumb, but somehow we managed to fall in love and make it last for whole 2 years. Those 2 years had their ups and downs. He was my first everything. My first relationship. My first breakup. We would see each other every day. My family knew about him, and his family knew about me. His mother loved me, and she still texts me to this day. What did go wrong? What could it happen? As time passed by, Ronald was changing a lot. He would ask me to go out with him every day. You must think that that's alright, right? Yes. But we saw each other all the time, so I couldn't have time to see my family or even my friends. At first, I liked the fact that we would meet up every day, but then I realized that he wanted to have me all to himself. He wanted my life to be all about him. He would start telling me what to wear and where to go. There were times when I would go out with my sister, and I would see him in the same place where I was going. He was following me and not letting me go alone anywhere. At this point, I thought that he didn't even trust me. If you don't trust someone in a relationship, then that means that there is no love, right? I was too young to give everything to him, to change for him. I remember once I broke up with him because I had had enough. He kept saying that he would change, but he never did. I realized that he doesn't look at me as his girlfriend anymore. He looked at me as someone I must obey, like a slave. There wasn't love anymore, so I left. I remember how angry he was when I told him that I wanted to leave him. But I didn't care. I wanted my freedom. It has been months, and I am loving my life. I feel like no one is watching every step of what I do anymore. I feel free. Plus, something new has happened in my life. Let me start from the beginning. One day I was walking my dog at the park in our city. It was a beautiful day, very sunny. It was just me, and I had my headphones on. My dog, Buna, is usually timid. She is shy and always listens to what I say. She is a good girl, until that day. As I was walking her, she ran away so fast, and I almost fell to the ground. I started chasing her. Then I saw her next to another dog, another golden retriever, a male. They were kissing and playing around. It looked like they were falling in love. Then, all of a sudden, someone says, "Is that your dog?" I looked up and saw a tall, blonde guy with ocean eyes. I said yes, and he told me that the other dog that Buna was playing with was his. We were trying to get them separated, but we couldn't. They kept running away together. I felt happy and sad at the same time. I was sad because I was so caught up in my life that I forgot that even animals feel lonely. Even animals need love and someone to fall asleep with. We decided not to separate them and let them play a little bit. He went and bought me a coffee, and we sat in the park, watching our dogs play. His name was Trim, which in English it means brave. What a beautiful name. Trim was a little bit shy, but I could tell that he was very respectful. He was 2 years older than me. He lived in the same neighborhood as me, but I had never seen him before. We stayed there for an hour, and we talked like we had known each other for years. He said that he walks his dog every day, so we decided to meet the next day and walk them together. As I walked home, I didn't have an internet connection, but I noticed someone had texted me when I went in. It was my ex, Ron. He had written a long text saying that he saw me with another guy, and he wanted to know who he was. How did he see me? Was he following me still? I didn't want to text him at all, but he kept calling me and saying that we should meet. I didn't want to meet with him because I no longer owe him any explanations. I ate dinner and decided to watch a movie. It was just my sister and me at home. My parents weren't there. Suddenly, someone starts knocking on the door and calling my name. It was Ron. I opened the door. He went in without us saying and went straight to my room. He looked like he was crying, but he acted like a psychopath, saying that I shouldn't be moving on so fast. He kept saying that we weren't done yet. I told him that that was the first time that I saw that guy and that we were not dating. He refused to trust me and kept yelling. I got afraid and told him that if he didn't get out of my house, I would call the police. He had no other choice but to leave. I fell asleep that night, getting worried about what would happen next. The next day, I decided to meet with Trimi to walk our dogs, as we said the other day. At first, I thought that it would be better if I didn't meet up with him, but why would I? We met up at the same place where we first saw each other. The dogs were so happy to see each other. I was happy to see Trimi too. We are so much alike. We talked, and it was a well-spent day. I couldn't help but think if my ex was there somewhere watching. There were a lot of people, and I couldn't tell if he was there. I was afraid I would run up to him, and he would say something to Trimi. Days had gone by, and there were no calls, no nothing from my ex. But I could see that he was still stalking me on my social media. I didn't care as long as I was not seeing him. But, on the other hand, Trimi and I were texting non-stop. I know that it hadn't been long since I broke up with my ex, but the way he treated me got me thinking that I might actually like him. One day, after we were done walking our dogs, Trimi called me to go to his place. He lived near the park and said that he would make me a Turkish coffee. He said that everyone was crazy about his coffee. I was curious, so I went, even though I am not a big fan of coffee. We went there and stayed on his balcony. His sisters and his mother were there. We all had a great time. They all loved Bunith too. After some hours of staying at Trimi's, I decided to go home. He walked me out of his house and said that we should have a date tomorrow, but without our dogs. Our dogs were the reason why we were going out in the first place. Was that an excuse? Does he like me more than friends? I didn't know, but I wanted to find out, so I said yes. Tomorrow had come, and I was getting ready for the date. Buna was barking all the time, begging to take her with me. But that day, I couldn't. It was time that Trimi and I got to know each other even better. I got ready even though we hadn't been texting that day at all. But we had already chosen the place and the time. We decided on going to a restaurant near us. We would meet there. I went some minutes late, just so I couldn't be the first one to arrive there. I would sound so depressive. But when I got there, he still wasn't there. I didn't want to order without him, so I just waited, staying on my phone awkwardly. I didn't want to text him immediately. I waited for an hour, thinking that maybe something had happened. Nobody had ever stood me up on a date. I was feeling so embarrassed. I tried to call him, but he wouldn't answer. Then he texted me that he couldn't come. I went home feeling confused. He didn't even tell me the reason why he couldn't come. The next day, I thought about walking my dog simultaneously as I usually do. I was hoping to see Trimi and find out what had happened last night. But he wasn't at the park. He never misses a day without walking his dog. I thought that something bad had happened, and I couldn't stay without figuring it out. I decided to go to his house. His mother opened the door, and she seemed happy to see me. She insisted on going in and having a coffee, but I said no. Then, Trimi came outside of the house, not looking in a good mood. We decided to sit on the balcony. He wasn't talking at all. Then, I asked him about what had happened. He responded angrily, "You should go. It would be bad if your boyfriend saw that you are here." "What boyfriend?" I asked, confused. Then it hit me. It was Roan, the crazy ex who apparently wouldn't leave me alone. I told him that I didn't have a boyfriend and that I would tell him if I had. He said that after I went home that day, Roan had come to his place and talked to him. He had said that he had told him that we were together. I couldn't believe my ears. Why would Roan do that? I explained to Trimi everything, and he believed me. I didn't know what to do with Roan. Should I talk to his parents? Should I call the police? I mean, he was stalking me and not leaving me alone. However, I thought that it would be better if I talked to him. I texted him and said that we should meet. I told him that we should meet somewhere in public, just in case he does something stupid. So, we did meet. He had bought me some flowers, and he seemed sad. I asked him why he said that to Trimi. His eyes were full of tears. He goes, "The idea of seeing you with someone else kills me." He said that he regrets everything he did to me and still loves me. But, if you love someone, you don't try to change them. The way they wear and the places they go. I explained to him that what he is feeling is not love. I think he understood that, and we agreed on staying friends. Will he stop leaving me alone? I don't know. Will Trimi and I get together? I don't know that either. All I know is that you should never try to change someone because that person will not change.
I am Rona, and I will tell you the story of my life, the story of what happened a couple of years ago. Where can I start? I was living with my family in a so-called third world country. It was me, my parents and my little brother. Life was not easy. My mother had no job, and my father was taking less money than we needed to survive. Even though I was only 16-year-old during that time, I wanted to work. I wanted to work for myself and for what I needed. But, where I lived, there weren't many jobs to do for women. That's why my mother had never worked, and I couldn't find a job. All I used to do was go to school and come back. How was the school, you might ask? The school was great, but the people there not so much. I had realized that when you don't have as much money as your friends, you can never feel comfortable around them. They didn't feel comfortable around me either, so that's why I had distanced myself. The house where we lived was so far from my school. We never had a car, and we always used to walk to school. During summer, it was easy, but in the winter, we would freeze to death. During winter, there were hungry dogs that always followed us to school. It was dangerous. Sometimes we would take some food with ourselves so that they wouldn't bite us. But, thank God I had my little brother. Even though I was the big sibling, I felt safe with him. We used to walk to school together. We would discuss our friends, how much money they had, and how lucky they were. My brother and I were the only ones walking, and it was so embarrassing. All of my friends' family had cars. Our friends had new phones. They used to wear all the clothes that were trending during that time. One of the reasons nobody wanted to date me was that my clothes were not trendy. And nobody wanted to date a poor girl. There were times when my brother and I would get back from school, and I couldn't help but complain. The school had gotten me so tired mentally and physically. It was just too much. But, still, I tried to hide it because I knew that it was a hard time for my parents too. They were trying their best. My father was working non-stop, and still, the money was never enough. I knew that he was taking loans from our friends and family. But, he never admitted. But, we knew. People had started to come to our house and ask for their money back. My father was sick and tired of working and then having nothing. I remember it was winter one day, and my brother and I came back from school. When we got home, there were suitcases around our house. I remember asking about what happened. Then, they had told us. They had told us that they had decided to take a dangerous road straight to first world countries. I remember being so exciting and scared at the same time. We were finally going to a better place, to France. If we made it to France, our lives would get better, and my father could pay back the people he took the loan to. We took our clothes, all of our stuff and some food. There was a big, old truck outside our house. My father had rented it for us. We got in and took a last look at our house and our village. There was a long road ahead of us, and we were just hoping for the better. The road trip was silent, and I knew that a million thoughts were running through my parents' minds. The road trip to the first world country would take us 3 days. We didn't know it, but they would be the most challenging 3 days of our lives. I remember the first day and how good it went. It made us think that this would be easy and that we would arrive there in a minute. We drove and drove, and then we stopped at a hill so we could sleep and take some rest so we could be ready for the next day. We were sleeping in the truck, and there was enough place for all of us. I remember how I couldn't sleep that day, thinking about how our lives would change forever. I was already thinking about the clothes that I was going to buy and the new iPhone that had just launched. That's how I slept that day. We woke up the following day and noticed that the snow had covered the whole place. It was cold. We ate some food and then hit the road without wasting our time. I remember the streets were so icy. We were driving so slow. We were stopped almost at every border by the military forces. They would ask us questions, and they would keep us for hours. Nobody liked refugees. But we were going there with good intentions, for a good start and a good life. Being stopped at every border took us a lot of time. The next day arrived, and we were ready to have some good sleep. Apparently, that night it had been snowing all night. When we woke up, we noticed that the truck wasn't starting. My father tried to start it, but nothing. Our truck's engines had been frozen because of the weather. I remember how stressed my parents were. They didn't know what to do. It had been hours, and the truck was still not starting. We were just wasting time. We decided to ask for help and see if anybody could fix our truck. But we had parked our truck somewhere in the mountains so that we could sleep, and there weren't any houses near. My father decided to walk some miles and ask for help as we were staying in the truck waiting. But there was nothing near us, and it was so cold, my father couldn't walk anymore. We stayed some hours in the truck to see if any car drove near us, but nobody showed up. There was only a little road left ahead of us, and we decided to put our fate into our legs. So, we decided to walk. It was the middle of winter, and it was so cold. We put on all the clothes we had, and we took our food. Walking was so hard, and we didn't even know where we would be spending the night. At that point, we didn't know if we would make it alive. We couldn't walk on the streets, and we had to walk into the depths of the mountains so that the police wouldn't ask us questions. The most challenging part of this story was when we had to cross a river to get away from the police. I will never forget the feeling. The feeling of my clothes getting wet by the river's cold water. My body was shaking, and I couldn't feel my legs. But crossing the river was the only way we could get away from the police and arrive at our destination. France. Our clothes were soaking wet, but we didn't care at that point. We were almost there. Our last most challenging part was spending the night outside. Our clothes were still a little bit wet. We had found an abandoned cabin and slept there on the balcony. The door was locked, but we didn't care. At least we weren't sleeping on snow. I remember getting up every hour in the middle of the night because I was scared if there would be any wild animals near us. I remember seeing my father guarding us. He hadn't slept at all. His nose was all red, and he looked so worried. That night I slept crying, hoping for the best of what was coming next. That night's sleep wasn't the best sleep, but we knew that we would be in France the next day. So, that's what happened. The next day had come, and there wasn't much food left for everyone. There were only 2 sandwiches left, so we shared them and hit the road. Finally, we arrived in France. We weren't looking our best, but we made it. We were tired, and we just needed someone's help. But I remember the first time that I saw the city of France. I was speechless. It was huge, nothing like my village. It looked like how we imagined and how we dreamed. The land of opportunities. It was snowing there too. There weren't many people around. I remember a policeman approached us. I remember my father's voice shaking, saying to the policeman that we were refugees and needed help. My father was begging for help. I will never forget that policeman's face and how much he had helped us. They took us to a place to stay. It wasn't a 5-star hotel, but we didn't care. We didn't need that. They gave us food and warm clothes. You should have seen my father's face and how happy he was. We all were happy. Our eyes were full of happy tears. I took a warm bath, and I fell asleep by the window while looking at the city. It has been months since we got here, in France. Our life has changed for the better. My father and my mother found a job. My father works as a taxi driver, and my mother works as a waiter. But they are getting paid very well. At least, my parents won't worry about the essential things to buy for us. My brother and I have started school. Thank God that our school is near the apartment where we live. It's only a 5-minute walk. The people at my new school are so kind, and I have made some good friends here. They respect us even though we are not from France. Everyone at my school works after school, so I decided to work too. Why not? I could have my own money, and I could buy whatever I wanted. Plus, I always wanted to work. We have a neighbor that has a 1-year baby, and she asked me if I could work as a nanny and take care of her child. I accepted. I love children, and it's a fun job that gets paid very well. However, not everything is promised here. We are still just refugees. We are still waiting for the government to give us the final decision. We still don't know if we can stay here forever or go back to our village. It would be a nightmare if we had to get back. I don't miss my village because there's nothing to do there. Plus, we have adopted here very fast. It would be so sad if I had to leave my new school friends here, my job, and this city. Everything is more accessible here. I just wanted to share my story and ask you to pray for me. To pray for my family and all the refugees out there. I don't wish for anyone to go through what we went through. Every refugee story is different, but I know that we all have the courage not only to survive but to preserve and rebuild our shattered lives. I am Madison, but everyone calls me Maddie. You can call me Maddie too. I wanted to share a piece of my life with you. At 16-year-old, life can be so dull and exciting at the same time. The most exciting part of my life is that I live in London. I love everything about London. Everyone thinks that people from London drink only tea, but that's not true. I love coffee. I have always loved coffee. My mom thinks that coffee might be the reason why I can't fall asleep at night. But I can't help it. The coffee wakes my soul up. There is so much to see and do in London. You can never get bored of it. I don't know if you know, but London has the most extensive library in the whole world. I love reading. Maybe that's why I drink so much coffee. It helps me not fall asleep and read more and more. I am obsessed with reading. My favorite book of all time is The 5 People You Meet in Heaven. Once, I have read a whole book in just 2 days. But, what can I do? I don't enjoy going on my social media anymore. Everything is so fake, and I am tired of it. Why would I enjoy watching someone posting their food? Okay, you ate a margarita pizza, now what? And, no, Jessica, you don't look like that in real life. We can see your Photoshop fails. I think I am an old soul, just like my beloved grandfather, which he had passed 3 years ago. He is the reason why I am so into reading books. My mother always says that my grandfather used to read me every night before bed when I was a baby. I wish I could turn back and hear my grandfather read to me just one more time. The love of my grandparents has always been an inspiration to me. But, what can I say about my parents? My parents have been divorced for 5 years now. It was a peaceful breakup. I remember their divorce and how much I suffered from it. It was very depressive. Plus, I was an only child. That made this whole situation even worse. I just couldn't deal with the fact that my parents weren't together anymore. But I don't care now. They both have their own lives now. I live with my mother, even though I love Dad so much. He is the most kind and has the most generous soul. But, sometimes life doesn't work how you want. I remember at first I felt so guilty that I chose to live with my mother. I used to cry for my dad and how lonely he was. But now he was a girlfriend, and his girlfriend is pregnant. I am happy for him. I really am. I go to my dad's place every week. I love his girlfriend, and she is very kind to me. She says that I will be the one who is going to name their baby. Even my mother is happy for Dad, even though sometimes I think she gets a little jealous because his girlfriend is so much younger than Mom. However, recently something had caught my attention. My mother had been happier than ever. She had been going out a lot. She had been shopping and wearing new clothes. You should have smelled her perfume, and it's very sexual. I think she might be seeing someone. But I don't want to be the one asking her. I want her to be the only one telling me the news if there is any. I remember one day, I didn't go to school because I was sick. My mother didn't know because she was working during that time. The bell rang, and I decided to see who it was. There was no one. But, there was a big bouquet with red flowers and a note. Well, this clearly wasn't for me. I am single, unfortunately. I put the flowers in. I didn't want to read the note first, but the curiosity was killing me. The note said, "See you tonight, get ready by 8. So, yes, my mother was for real seeing someone. I put her flowers in her bed and decided to play it off like I didn't see anything. She came home and saw the flowers. She seemed very shy and embarrassed. But I wanted to make her feel good. I said to her that that was okay and that I wanted her to find her true love. Love has no age and no time. Then, she told me about everything. There was a man called Mitchell, and they had been dating for 1 year. Apparently, Mitchell's wife had died for 3 years now from cancer. They have one child, a son. It must be sad to lose your mother and know that you might not see it ever again. For a minute, I was glad my parents were divorced. At least, I could see and be with them. My mother got ready that night and went out. I was happy for her. She deserves someone to bring her flowers and love her in the best possible way. After some months, my mother told me some very good news. My mother and Mitchell had decided that it was time for us to meet as a whole family. I was excited. We got ready and decided to meet at a restaurant. And there it was, Mitchell and his son. Why didn't my mother tell me that Mitchell's son is the same age as me? I thought he was going to be younger or something. We sat and then started talking about random stuff. Mitchell was so kind and funny. I could tell that he was a good man. But on the other hand, Mitchell's son was so mysterious. Apparently, his name is Duor. He was 2 years older than me. He didn't talk much. He just kept staring. But generally, this date went very well. Days went by, and nothing exciting was happening. The school was almost over for this season. Summer was there. I was excited about summer. Life becomes better. Every summer, my mother and I always have some type of vacation. We go somewhere far, somewhere beaky, and spend some days there. My mother works, so she needs some time off. That's what we did that summer too. But that time, something was different. It wasn't just my mother and me anymore. My mother thought that it would be good if we called Mitchell and his son. I agreed, why not? So that's what we did. We got in the car. A long road was ahead of us. Duor and I were sitting in the back seat, and this way, we had more chances to get to know each other better. Just like Mitchell, Duor was funny too. But I'd always catch him staring at me in a way that I can't describe. He had a perfect style and had a lot of cool rings on his fingers. I couldn't help but look at them. He had beautiful hands. After some hours of driving, I had nothing to do. It was getting boring. I decided to read my books. I got so lost in my book and in what was happening there. Then all of a sudden, I felt that something had touched my shoulder. It was Duor. He had fallen asleep on my shoulder. I didn't want to wake and ruin his sleep. I felt bad. Plus, he smelled so good. The road trip was long, but we finally had made it to our destination, the beach. I spent the whole day napping, but it was beach day all day the next day. I put on my bikini, got myself an iced coffee, and got myself a good book. That's how I spend my beaky days. I love to tan while I am reading. But Duor had something else on his mind. He thought that it would be a great idea if we all took a boat. But my mother hates boats. She gets seasick. Then, he pushed on taking me with him. It was just Duor and me. As we were getting on the boat, I wanted to take my book with me. He said, "Come on, be fun for once." For once. How can he know how fun I am? The first minutes of the boat ride, I was moody about what he had said. But he kept talking and making funny jokes that were hard to stay mad at. Suddenly, he asked me to put sunscreen lotion on his back. Then, he put sunscreen on me, without me asking. I was shy and didn't know what to say. We got back, and I got back to my reading. The next day came. It was my mother's and Mitchell's second anniversary of their relationship. They decided that it would be great if we all went to a fancy dinner. But Duor said that they should go without us. Maybe he was right. They needed some alone time. That's what they did. I decided to stay in for the night. Suddenly, I get a text from Duor, saying that I should meet him in his hotel room. It was across my room. I decided to go since I had nothing to do. He said that we should go to a club near our hotel. We got dressed and decided to go. Even though we were not 21-year-old, they let us in. The vibes were so good, and we danced a lot. We had some drinks. A lot, I must say. We were dancing, and he would grab me by my waist. I was saying to myself, is it the alcohol, or do I really like this guy? Everything happened so fast. We kissed. I didn't mean to kiss him. He was the first to take me to move. I could have stopped him, but I didn't. What was happening with me? We both look at each other surprisingly. We didn't say a word about what happened. We got to our hotel and went into our separate rooms. The next day had come, and we pretended as nothing had happened. I know that the kiss was a bad thing to do. He is my stepbrother. But, last night I couldn't sleep without thinking of it. He is exactly my type. I'd date him if he weren't my stepbrother. Plus, he was older than me. I liked that fact. I decided to play it off like I don't remember what had happened yesterday. I was going by the beach, and there he was. He was waiting for me. We met and acted like we didn't kiss. We decided to take another boat ride together, hoping that we would discuss what happened yesterday. As long as we left the shore and that nothing could be seen, he came at me. And he kissed me. I still didn't hesitate and didn't say no. I felt guilty, and I didn't want this to happen. I felt like we were betraying our parents. I told him those exact words. He agreed, but he said that he was starting to have a feeling for me. I was starting to feel in a certain way too, but I didn't say anything. There was no need for us to say anything because this thing shouldn't have happened at all. We decided that the moment we were going to be on the shore from the boat ride, we would forget that we ever kissed. And that's what we did. We decided that this would be our little secret. The road trip home wasn't awkward at all. I felt happy that we still could talk and joke around, even after what had happened. For a second, I thought that I could be in love with my stepbrother. But that would be so selfish of me. We kissed because we felt vulnerable during that time. There was nothing else there. Maybe it could be. Who knows? But it is not our time to love. Our parents deserve love more than we do. We are still young, and we know that other souls out there are waiting to fall in love with us. I am just happy to share this here since no one knows about this.
Guys, I am Rona, and I just turned 16-year-old. I wanted to take a minute from my chaotic life and tell you this. A piece of my life. Everyone has their own story, and I do too. I come from the tiny city of Kosovo, Gjilin. I love Gjilin. I have spent all of my life here. But Gjilin doesn't have a lot to offer. I always dreamt that I would do something big in my life. I have dreams that I can't do here. And that's where my story takes place. I have just graduated high school, and I am so ready to take the world. I have always shown a love for art since I was a kid. I could literally draw before I could talk. I love everything related to art. I love going to museums. I love losing myself in paintings. And that's what I want to do for the rest of my life. I want to go to an art school. But there is a problem. There isn't any art school in Gjilin. But there is one big art school just an hour away, in Pristina. And that's where I want to go and pursue my dream. I live with my parents, grandparents, and 2 little sisters. At first, I was so afraid to tell my family that I wanted to go to Pristina. My parents work, but they don't earn as much as we need. My mother is a janitor at a bank, and my father is a taxi driver. If I decide to go to Pristina, I have to live there. I have to eat there. I have to pay for my school there. Plus, Pristina is way more expensive than my city. I know that my parents can't afford to send me there, even though they have always tried their best for us. But I want to go there. I want to spend the rest of my life doing something I love and enjoy. One day, as I was scrolling on my phone, I came across some news. The art school applications had started, and there weren't so many places left. It is not easy to get into this school. You must be very talented, but I believe I am. I felt like I was just wasting my time, so I decided to tell my parents about my plan. They told me that we couldn't afford it with their eyes full of tears. I felt bad and angry at the same time. That day I spent the whole evening crying. It felt like I was going to lose my dream forever. Then, my grandparents came into my room and tried to talk to me, saying that everything would be just fine. And they were right. Things took place. They gave me some very good news. They had saved money for years and wanted to give them to me to pay for my school. I didn't want to take their money, I felt bad. But they insisted. They said, "We are old. Our lives had already ended. You have a whole future ahead of you. Take our money and go follow your dreams." Why are grandparents the kindest people in the entire world? I couldn't refuse the money. I told my parents about it, and they were so happy. I decided that the next day I would apply to the school. The next day had come, and that's what I did. I took the bus to Pristina. I was nervous and shaking until I saw the test. It was easy. The results would take only 3 days. It was the most stressful 3 days of my life. A million questions ran through my mind, and I was overthinking everything. What would I do if I can't get in? I'd be in a complete depression. But one morning, I got an email. Guess what? I got in. I felt so happy and excited. My dream was only some steps away. But I didn't know that things would get more challenging and complicated. Now I had to find a place to live in Pristina and some part-time job to pay rent and my food. After some research, I had found a very cute little flat that was only some minutes away from the art school. But the rent was so expensive. It would take 2 people to pay for it. I couldn't find a roommate. My friends had already found their roommates. As I was searching for a job near my school, I had across an announcement that somebody had made. The announcement had said they needed a roommate near the place where I wanted to take the flat. So, I called that number. The person agreed to share the flat with me and pay the rent together. But, there was only one problem. That person was a boy. At first, I didn't want to agree, but the school would start next week. I didn't have time to think. I decided not to tell my family about this because they would get the wrong ideas. Plus, I was sure that I would never see that guy. I'd be busy. I would be busy with school and studying. Plus, I had already applied for a part-time job at a coffee shop. That means that I will not have any contact with him whatsoever. The time had come for me to get out of my nest and become an adult. It was moving day. I packed as much as I could. I love to cook, so I brought a lot of stuff with me, some sauces that my mother made, and some other stuff. I decided to meet up with the guy and get the keys to our flat. I didn't even know his name and how he looked. It could be anyone. He could be a killer. A psychopath? All I know is that he is going to the same school as I am, art school. I arrived there, and at the door of our flat, a boy was waiting there. He had suitcases. It was him. I felt shy when I first saw him. He was so tall, and he looked so aesthetic. His style was out of this world. His name was Eddie. We got into the flat. There were only 2 rooms and a living room. Our rooms were small and very near to each other. There was an old, cute tiny kitchen. We spent that whole day cleaning the flat and getting to know each other. I really felt like I could be best friends with Eddie. Eddie, the flat, and everything had good vibes. My parents had called me 3 times in just some hours. I still hadn't told them that my roommate was a boy. Eddie was an artist too. I had the chance to see some of his works, and they were mind-blowing. We noticed that we had some classes together, and we were glad. It's hard to start school without a friend. I slept so well the first night, like I was in my own house. But, I had to wake up. A big day was ahead of me. The first day of school. I was in my PJ, scrolling through my phone, going to the bathroom. I forgot I was sharing the flat with someone. I ran into Eddie. He was going to the bathroom too. I got ready and arrived on the first day. The school was so beautiful and big. There were a lot of talented students there, and I could tell there was going to be competition. I can't say much about the first day because we didn't do much. After school, I had to go to my job at the coffee shop. I noticed that the coffee shop didn't have much work for me. Good for me. But, the boss was so respectful. It was such a long day. I got tired and just wanted to sleep. I saw that Eddie was cooking in the kitchen when I got in. He goes, "I hope you like spaghetti." I was so surprised that he had cooked for me too. Plus, I love spaghetti. We talked about how our day went. I couldn't help but think how Eddie is the sweetest person that I've ever come across. I thought that it would be weird living with a guy, but I loved it. Eddie was making it so easy. Weeks went by, and everything was just fine. I visited my parents every weekend, but every time I would come back to Jylin, I would actually miss Eddie so much. We were getting so close with each other. We would draw together and talk about stuff that I had never talked about before with anyone. We would watch TV all night on our crappy couch and our crappy television. One night we actually fell asleep on our couch together, and when we woke up, we felt so shy. There were moments when I felt like we could actually like each other. One day I came back from work, and I saw Ed was painting a drawing. The living room was a total mess, and he was shirtless. He was all covered in paint and was smiling. That smile got me feeling like I could actually be into him. I got back from work one day, and I noticed that Ed wasn't home. He usually was home. I decided to make noodles for the both of us, since all we had been eating was pasta and fast food, and decided to wait for him to watch a movie together. Suddenly, someone knocked on the door, and it was Eddie. Eddie wasn't alone this time, he was with a girl. They were holding hands and laughing. He introduced me to her. She was so beautiful. She had long, sexy legs and hair. They didn't sit to watch the movie. They went and got into his room. Then Ed texts me saying, "Can you go out for a little bit?" I don't know why I felt so jealous and angry. I went out and didn't come back for some hours. I didn't want to disturb them. Then, I got home, and Ed was sitting on the couch. I didn't want to talk. I went to my room. I couldn't sleep but think. I was thinking about how I left my dream behind. I was lost spending time with Eddie, and all this time he had a girlfriend, and he didn't tell me. So, I decided that I would focus more on school from that night. That's what I came for, after all. Weeks went by, and we were communicating so cold. I did my best to avoid him. I tried not to be home all the time just to not see him. One day my parents came to my place in Pristina. I didn't know, and I wasn't home. Plus, they didn't know that my roommate was actually a guy. Ed had texted me that day saying that I should come home. I thought something bad had happened. I went home, and there they were, my parents. They were talking with Eddie, and then Eddie went outside. My parents were angry that I didn't tell them, but then they understood that I had no other choice. They had come to visit me with some bad news. My grandmother had died, and my heart broke into pieces. I couldn't believe it. I decided to go home to Jylland for a week to stay with my family during these hard times. I didn't communicate with Ed that whole week. A week went by, and it was time for me to follow the dream. I remember saying to myself that I would work even harder now for my grandmother. She wanted me to finish school. I went back to Pristina, and there Ed was. Eddie was feeling so sad about my grandmother. He made me cry with his words. We started hugging. I didn't know how much I needed that hug until we hugged. He was holding my face telling me that everything was going to be fine, and then kissed me. I stood back, confused. I asked him about that mysterious girl that he was the other day. He said that that was nothing serious and that he liked me. I liked him too, but I didn't want to admit it. The following day I woke up to the noises of some suitcases. Eddie was leaving and saying that he got a job as an artist and would take a break from school for a year. Was it too late to confess my love for him? Was it too late to say to him that he shouldn't be going? I decided not to say a word, but I know for sure that I will miss him. He said that he would be back within a year. Till then, I will be working for my dream. And if Ed was meant—
I am Rita, and I will take you back to the 1999s. What was life like in the 1999s? In 1999 I was only 16-year-old. I remember it like it was yesterday. Life was good living together with the whole family. There was me, Mom, Dad, and my 2 little brothers. I was the oldest child in the family. Being the oldest child means having responsibilities. I remember I used to help my mother around the house. I practically raised my 2 little brothers. They are not so little anymore. Life was easy back then. We were happy and grateful for what we had. We were grateful for our little village and all its good. We took care of our lands, and the grounds thanked us by giving us food. Fruits of all kinds. I remember how much we loved our animals, our big, healthy cows. I was only 16-year-old, but I was fearless. I remember wanting to ride our horses, but my dad never let me. Winters back then were never easy. But it was that season that brought us all together in one room. The winters were so cold, and we used to all sleep together. We didn't know that something terrible would happen during the coldest days of winter. As far as I remember, it was morning, and we were staying inside our house when suddenly we heard people screaming. We didn't even have the chance to look through the window and see what was happening. My father came running and said that the military forces had gotten into our villages. I am pretty sure that I didn't even understand what my father had said back then. But, judging by how his face looked and how his voice sounded, I knew that something terrible was going to happen to us. I remember my mother running fast, getting clothes and some little food. My little brothers were crying their eyes out. I remember I was so scared. We took as many things as possible in such a little time and got outside the house. I wish we didn't get outside of our house. I wish I could delete the memory when I looked at all the people that lived in the village. Everyone was crying and screaming. Some babies were just born. Some people were sick and could barely walk. I remember that some couldn't find their loved ones. They were screaming their names so loud, desperately. The military forces had forced our village to move and cross the border. That time I didn't know what it meant. But we just kept walking, not knowing what to do or where to go. We thought that we should follow the crowd. We had worn 2 jackets each, but still, it was one of the coldest days since I can remember. We were walking, not knowing that that would be the last time we would be together in our village. I remember myself crying because we had left all the animals behind us. Even the animals were shouting and screaming, and even they knew that something was not all right. We were walking and walking till we couldn't feel our legs. The mountains of our villages were full of snow and ice, making it harder to walk. I remember like it was yesterday. My feet were so cold because the water had already got into my boots. At that time, my little 2 brothers were only 10-year-old and 8-year-old. My 8-year-old brother, Tommy, cried non-stop, and I carried him because I felt terrible. I didn't want to cause stress to my parents because they were already very anxious. That day, I remember seeing my father crying for the first time. It broke my heart because he had never cried before in front of us. And, seeing a man crying like that, like a child, my eyes are full of tears just thinking about that. As we were walking and following the crowd, our parents had written some stuff on our arms. As I remember, they had written our names, birth names, and the village we were in. They used to do this just in case we went missing or something. This made us even more scared and anxious. I remember that just the thought of getting separated from my family would make me go insane. After some hours of walking, I remember that we got in a truck. That truck could barely fit all of us. We were more than 100 people. We were holding hands non-stop because you could literally get lost in that truck. I remember that I could hear a thing my parents were saying. Everyone was crying and screaming. All of a sudden, the truck had stopped. I remember us thinking that the truck had problems, and that we had to stop. But, no, the military forces were there and had stopped the truck. The military forces made everyone get out of the truck and separated us into 2 groups. We were separated from our parents. They took my mother and father and then told the truck driver to go. To this day, this was the most challenging moment of my life. I couldn't hold the tears and be strong for my 2 little brothers. I broke down. Luckily enough, an older woman was there in the truck and tried to make me feel less worried. I remember every word she said to me. Don't worry, they will be back. To this day, she still was one of the kindest women I've ever met. She used to say that if we didn't find our parents, she wouldn't leave us alone. She would take us with her. And this made me feel better and safe for a while. I wish I could find her and thank her because she said things I needed to wear, and things I wanted to hear. The drive was long, and we got hungry. We had a backpack that my parents had packed for us. There was bread and a bottle of water. We shared that with my 2 little brothers, pieces to pieces, but that wasn't enough. It had been 1 day since we hadn't seen our parents and we were worried. I didn't know if they were dead or alive. I didn't know where they were and if they had eaten anything. I remember not sleeping at all, scared if the military forces were going to separate me from my little brothers. They were my responsibility now. We had welcomed a new day, and that older woman had given us some food. To this day, I still don't know what we would do if this older woman didn't give us something to eat. We would starve. I remember what the people used to talk about in that truck. They said that we would all die. I used to cover my little brother's ears so they couldn't hear anything. Then, some good news. Someone shouted, saying that we had arrived at the border and were ready to cross it. They told us to change to different vehicles, so we did. I took my little brother and went into a giant truck. There were people there, and all of the people there, I noticed a face. It was my mother. I couldn't believe my eyes. I shouted with all my lungs and said her name. She came into us running, and we just started hugging. And this was one of the best moments of that time until I had asked my mother something. I asked about my father and where he was. I remember her crying and saying that she didn't know where Dad was. She had said that the military forces had separated them into two groups, females and males, and that she hadn't seen him since the day we all got separated. We shouted his name and looked everywhere to see if we could find him. But we didn't. We got in the truck together with my mother, and then we crossed the border. We had no other choice but hope to see our father after crossing the border. We thought that maybe he would be there, waiting for us. The drive was long and sad. I remember that we couldn't keep our minds off our father. Where was he? Was he okay? Was he hungry? After we crossed the border, we had asked around about my father, but we couldn't find him. We asked our military forces too. They kept saying that he would be back tomorrow. But tomorrow came, and my father wasn't there. They kept saying us the same words, over and over again, that he would be back tomorrow. Days went by, but we couldn't miss a day without searching for him. Then, we found out that we weren't the only ones searching for someone. Parents were searching for their kids. Kids were searching for their parents. Someone said that the military forces had killed them, but I remember not accepting this option. We weren't safe to go back to our village, so a family had sheltered us. We had stayed there for a month. We ate and slept there. That family had helped us a lot. They were a big family, but they never insisted on getting us food. They were so generous. As far as I remember, their names were Anna and Sakal. They had been married for years and had 8 children together. I remember the months that I spent there made me feel like I was at home. They had a farm, and they had animals, just like we did. It made me feel like everything was all right. Their children were so friendly and kind. I remember that the war and the winter were already over, and we would just spend hours outside playing like everything was just fine. But then, I'd watch my mother's face and see how sad she was. They even offered to help us find my father, but there was no success. By that time, it had been almost 2 months, and we still hadn't heard from our father. It was time that we went home. To our bed, to our animals, to our old life back. I remember the ride back home, and I remember how sad it was. It was like we were leaving our father behind. Our last hope was that our father would have been there when we arrived at our village. He would have fed the chickens and the cows, he would have made our bed, and he would have been waiting for us. We had arrived at our village, and nothing felt the same anymore. The spring had sprung. I remember the trees of our village and how green they had been. The mountains looked breathtaking, and at that moment, I realized how much I loved and missed my village. However, the military forces had burnt our houses to the ground. There were no memories left, just ashes. And our animals had left. And the sad part of all this was that our father wasn't there. We had asked some of the neighbors if they had seen him, but nobody had seen where he was. Many of our neighbors were not found, and some of them were announced dead. We had to start our lives from the start. Without you, Dad. To this day, we still don't know your fate, but we pray for you every day. We don't know if you are alive or somewhere searching for us, but all I know is that we miss and think about you every day of our lives. We were lucky to survive, but my life has never been the same again without you, Dad. When humans start wars, they don't know the consequences. They don't know how precious life is until it is lost. A war can never make peace. A war can never make someone a winner. All it does is create a mess and bring the destruction of humanity. My name is Beatrix, and I just wanted to tell a story about what happened 2 years ago in my life. A lot has happened in 2 years. 2 years ago, I was only 16-year-old. Life was not easy. I grew up in a very toxic household. I grew up with my parents fighting all the time. I don't know if there was a day when my parents didn't fight about something. But, when it came to me, they were completely different people. My parents are the sweetest parents anyone could ever ask for. They care about me. They love me. I am their only child. I was spoiled and loved like no other. But, sometimes, love is not just enough. Marriage is not just about love. Marriage is about commitment, and being responsible for what you do and say. Communication is key, but my parents didn't have that. I was only 16-year-old, but I was old enough to notice that they didn't know how to communicate with each other. My parents always fought, but I knew that it wasn't that serious until one day. I remember it like it was yesterday. I got woken up from the sound of my mother screaming to my father. My father came home late the other night, and my mother had found out that he cheated. My mother decided to file for divorce, even though my dad begged her to stay. I remember I felt so bad for my mother. No woman deserves to get cheated on. They decided not to live together anymore. One day they had asked me a very important question. They asked me if I'd choose to stay with my mother or with my father. I loved them equally. I mean, they are my parents. But the one that got cheated on was my mother. I couldn't be the one to let her down too. Plus, my mother had always been like a father too. She has always been there for me. So, that's what I did. I chose my mother. We left home. At that time, my mother didn't have a job. We had no job and nowhere to live. The only person that we could call to help us was my grandmother. My grandmother lived alone, so we had the opportunity to live there for some months until we figured some things out. Living at my grandma's house was fun. My mother was searching for a job. So, she was always out doing job interviews. Most of the time, I was home only with my grandmother. I loved her cooking. She cooked with love. She had told me some of her secret recipes. We would talk for hours. She would tell me about her life when she was a teenager and how much she missed my grandpa. I felt safe at my grandmother's house. The vibes were different. But, during that time, my mother was in a terrible place. My father had always been wealthy. When we went to the court, he won everything. His lawyers helped him take all of his wealth for himself, and not give anything to my mother or me. My father was almost making me go with him. But, I was old enough to choose. To this day, I still don't regret going with my mother. My father had shown his true colors. If he really loved us, he would help us and give us some money. At least for a good start. My mother struggled to find a job, and I remember feeling so bad. She was trying so hard. I remember wanting to quit school to work something and help her. But she didn't let me. She always said that I should work hard and finish school to be independent. Months went by, and my mother still hadn't gotten a job. At that time, my mother had turned into a whole different person. She was angry at life, at everything. Even at 16-year-old, I understood that she felt like everyone had let her down. At some point, she was ready to give up. She stopped going to job interviews. I remember how she didn't even want to get a bath. She was deep in depression, and she always used to fight with my grandmother. My mother used to put the anger that she had on my grandmother. One day, they got into a huge pointless argument, and my mother had enough. My grandmother was crying, saying that we didn't need to go. But, my mother thought that this would be for the better. This way, my mother would try harder and not give up so easily. My grandmother gave us our grandfather's old car. She couldn't drive anymore, so she thought we would put it to good use. She gave us her car, food, clothes and some money. It was winter, and we had no idea where to go. I remember us driving with no destination. It was snowing so much. It was almost Christmas time. It should have been the most wonderful time of the year. But, not this time. We drove and drove. We didn't know where to go, and we hadn't much money with us. It was the middle of the night, and we got tired. We found a mountain not so far from the city, and we decided to park the car there and stay the night. We shouldn't even have parked there. We would have been arrested. But, we had no other choice. I remember I was so scared to sleep in the car. We were scared if someone would knock in our windows and try to kidnap us or something. I hadn't had much sleep on the first night, but then I got used. But, the car was a blessing. Without it, we would be sleeping on the streets in the cold. We lived in our car for almost 2 weeks. It was the most challenging time of our lives. At that time, I wasn't going to school anymore. So, we kind of just stayed and hoped that my mother could find a job. I missed my bed, and I missed having a hot shower. It had been days that I hadn't had a proper meal. We used to eat cheap fast food with the bit of money that our grandmother gave us. The nights were so cold, and we used to sleep hugging each other. I remember asking my mother to go back to our grandmother's house, but my mother just wanted to make it alone. Even though we lived in the car, she never lost a job interview. I remember how she used to play it off at times like everything was all right, and how she used to sing and dance, to not make me feel worried. But, I knew that deep inside, she was sad and anxious until one day, one perfect day, I was staying in the car, and I saw my mother by the window. She told me some good news. She said that she had got a job at a restaurant, and she will start working from tomorrow. My mother told the restaurant owner about our life, our situation, and he said that we could sleep there. At his restaurant. Our life was about to be changed forever, and we just didn't know it yet. We took our car and drove there. The restaurant was so beautiful and comfy. We met with the boss. My mother's boss was so generous and kind, and he was named Mitchell. He had asked me how school was going, but I told him that I couldn't afford school right now. I told him that I wanted to work and help my mother. He accepted that, and he had made me an assistant. I worked as my mother's assistant. Life was beautiful during that time. I could finally have some good sleep and eat some warm, good meal. I woke up early, worked, and had met some beautiful people. It felt good living and having a routine. It had been 2 years since my mother and I worked at the restaurant. I could tell that my mother was happy. I was happy too. During our time working at Mitchell's restaurant, something beautiful had happened. Love had happened. My mother fell in love with her boss, Mitchell. Who wouldn't love Mitchell? He was so kind and gentle, and he had helped us a lot. He became like my father in such a short time. He had never been married before because he had always been busy with his restaurant. But he loved my mother more than anyone before. He loved kids, and he treated me like I was his daughter. However, my mother's goal now is to be independent. She knew what she went through when she got divorced. She doesn't want to make that mistake again. For those 2 years that we had been working, my mother and I saved money. Since my mother always wanted to have something on her own, we decided to open a coffee shop. We thought it would be a great idea since I wasn't going to school during that time. I wanted to take a break and just kind of put our life together. Plus, my mother needed my help. We were excited about this, and we had decided to tell Mitchell. Even though we wouldn't be working at his restaurant, we loved the idea. He said that that's okay and that we should follow our dreams. And that's what we did. We followed our dreams. New York has the most beautiful places and views, so it was easy for us to find a place to open our coffee shop. Mitchell had helped us a lot. He had helped us with painting the walls of our store. We decided to give the store a vintage look, and it turned out so good. The coffee shop was so small, but it was so cute. The coffee shop had large windows, and you could see everything that was happening outside. It's a place where you could bring your favorite book and just read for hours while drinking your coffee. Our coffee shop is open 24/7. I work there as a waiter, and I love it. At first, it was just my mother and me, but now we have 4 employees. All of our 4 employees are females. Our employees are women that needed help, just like we did. It feels good helping people. I know how it feels to need help and not get any. Every day is a good day at our coffee shop. Every day we meet new beautiful people, and I have made a lot of friends. After some time, my mother and Mitchell decided not to waste time and have a wedding. It was one of the most beautiful weddings that I have ever seen. It felt good seeing my mother in a white dress and happy. Maybe it is time for me to have a brother or a sister. Who knows? My mother and I often visit the grandmother. They are on good terms now. We had given her car back, even though she insisted on not to. But we wanted to leave everything that reminded us of bad times. My grandmother comes to our coffee shop almost every day. She says that my coffee is her favorite coffee to drink. I am going to school now, after that big break. Every day after school, I come here to our coffee shop, and I help my mother. Are you curious about what happened with my father? Well, I don't know what happened with him. We hadn't heard from him since my mother filed the divorce. He hadn't even called to see if we were okay. But that doesn't matter. We are okay now. Better than never. I just wanted to share my story and say that life works in very unpredictable ways, and that you should never give up. Life has its ups and downs, and that's the beauty of it. We should embrace the good and the bad times.
This story takes place in the heart of France, Paris. Paris is one of the most romantic places ever to exist. They call it the city of love. Is it really, though? I am Iris, and this month I'll be turning 18-year-old. I was born, and I have lived all my life in Paris. When talking about Paris, the thing that comes to our mind is Eiffel Tower, streets crowded with tourists, beautiful little coffee shops, and the list goes on. However, what people don't know is that one of Paris's best-kept secrets is the countryside. That's where I live. It's a tiny piece of heaven tucked away in the 20th arrondissement of Paris known as La Campagne à Paris. I love where I live. The views are straight from a movie. Each building is unique and quirky with gentle pastel colors and paved, cobbled paths. It's nothing like the rest of Paris. In a good way. Life is easy here. My school is only some blocks away from my house. My friends' houses are near too. But the most awkward thing about where I live is that my neighbor is my ex-boyfriend. His name is Louis. Louis was great in everything that a girl could ask for. A great smile, tall, respectful. But he was too good. When I see that the person I'm dating is way too much into me, I tend to stand back. We never argued, and there was never drama. And this kind of makes me get bored of it. I want my relationship to be exciting, with ups and downs, as it should be. I want someone to disagree with me, not just agree with everything I say, like they don't have an opinion on their own. However, I don't know if I can call him my ex-boyfriend because it was more like just a summer fling. We dated the whole of last summer. I get a feeling that he is still not over me. But what can I do? I get bored so easily. And it's actually a serious problem. Do you know that feeling when you are in summer and feel so vulnerable? You feel like you are free to do anything. A new hair color, a new tattoo, a new piercing. Sometimes even a new boyfriend. Ugh, I miss summer right now. Winters can be so depressive. And I can't even wear what I want to wear. I love wearing crop tops and letting my stomach out a little bit. This is the last year of high school. Next year, God knows where I'll be because I still don't even know what I want to study in college. However, I am excited for this year. We have prom, and also I have to pass my driving license. I hope Louis doesn't ask me to be his prom date because that would be awkward. I don't know about the country you live in, but prom is usually the night for couples to lose their virginities here. I wouldn't wait for prom night, but I still haven't found someone special yet. Call me old-fashioned, but I don't want to lose my virginity with someone like Louis. For example, I aspire to have some deep-level connections with someone. Every day is the same day at our school. It's like déjà vu. All over again. But, one day, one random Thursday, a new boy came into my class. He walked and then sat without even starting at anyone. He was tall, dark-skinned, curly hair. The teacher made him introduce himself. Apparently, his name is Aaron. During the lunch break, all the girls were all over him. I knew this would happen. But, I am not this kind of girl. I like to look uninterested. That's my secret to making someone interested in me. Days went by, and we didn't even talk. But, I could notice some stares here and there. I saw how he was talking to the other girls. And I could tell that he wasn't just like any other guy. He was mysterious until one day, Aaron decided to come out of his shell and actually talk to me. He goes, "Where can I eat something good around here?" I told him about my favorite place where I get food every day. He said, "Wanna ditch the classes and go eat something?" How could I say no? I wanted to know about this guy. He said to meet outside. I went outside of school. And here he was, waiting for me. Smiling. We started walking and talking. There was a vibe already. We go into the store and sit on the corner by the window. Then he orders for me without even asking what I'd want. He said, "Trust me." That was attractive. We talked about our favorite movies, our first kisses and so on. I didn't notice how many hours had passed until my mother called me. We decided to leave. He put his hand around my waist and whispered in my ear, "See ya." My walk home had me questioning myself. Why didn't he ask for my number? Guys usually ask for my number immediately. Maybe he truly was different from the other guys. It had been days since our little date. And we didn't even share a word at school. I was avoiding him in the hallway at this point. Then, someone texted me. A text said, "Same spot. At 2 p.m. Was that Aaron? Well, yeah, for sure. I was in a dilemma about going or not. I decided to go there. He was sitting on the same spot as that day. I went inside, and he gave me a little kiss on the cheek. It got me off guard. He had already ordered for me again. This time, he asked if I had a boyfriend. And I said no. I didn't ask him. And he said, "Don't you want to know if I have a girlfriend?" I said, "Do you?" He said not yet and started smiling. Aaron said, "You're gonna go to prom with me." And started smiling. I didn't say anything. I just laughed it off, trying to play it cool. He was staying a little bit too near me. I could smell his perfume. And I could feel the warmth of his breath as he was talking to me. At this point, I just wanted him to kiss me. But he didn't. That's how our second date ended. As I was walking home, I saw Louis, the ex. He said that he wanted to talk to me. And I said sure. He started holding my hand, asking me to go to prom with him. I said no and told him that I'd made plans with someone else. He seemed angry and wanted to know who the guy was. Why would you care? I said. He said that he wanted to know so he could fight the guy. I immediately started laughing. But he seemed to be talking seriously. Knowing that Louis probably still loves me, I was worried. I was worried about what would happen. I didn't want anything to affect my relationship with Aaron. We had a good start. It was almost prom night, and everyone was starting to freak out. I still didn't have any idea of what I was gonna wear. As I talked with my girls about some dresses, I got a text. Aaron had texted me saying, "Meet me after school." So, that's what I did. We met. He said that today we're going to find our prom outfits. At first, I was like no. But then he got me into it. We went to a couple of stores. And nothing. It was my time to try for some dresses. He was the one picking the dresses for me. Every time I went out from the wardrobe with a dress, Aaron had this look on his face. It was clear that he liked me. There was a lot of tension between us. We both could feel it. Then, I came across a black dress with an open leg. I tried it, and I loved it. It was time to show it to Aaron. You should have seen his face. He was speechless. He came near me and said, "This is the one," and kissed me. I think my cheeks got red for a second. Then, it was his turn to try for a suit. Every time he was trying suits, he would come out shirtless. He was showing off. But I loved it. We got our clothes, and I could say that it was one of the best dates I've ever been with. The day of the prom came, and here I was, getting ready. Aaron was waiting outside my house. But then he came inside because he wanted to say hi to my parents. He was looking so good. I just wanted to kiss him, but I couldn't in front of my parents. The moment we got in the car, we gave each other a little kiss. We arrived at prom, and everyone was looking at us. I heard that Louis couldn't find a date. I saw him. He was standing in a corner alone. I felt bad for a second. Hours went by, and Aaron and I were having the best time. Aaron is so easy to stay with. As we were slow dancing, I saw Louis coming at us. He pushed Aaron to the ground. Aaron seemed confused. He didn't know who Louis was. He heard me saying, "Louis, stop." Aaron said, "You know this fool," and then he punched him in the face. The security got us out, and I was shaking. I told him who Louis was, but he didn't seem to care. He was just worried if I was okay. So, basically, Louis got so jealous he decided to do this. But he didn't ruin our prom night. Things just got better from there. I realized how mature Aaron is and that I could love him. We weren't allowed to get back at prom. So we got to the car. Aaron said, "I got an idea. Let's get to my place." He said that he was home alone. It was too early to end this night. So we went to his home. We stayed in our prom outfits and decided to watch a movie. He was touching my hair and kissing my forehead. We both fell asleep in that way. We got up at the sound of my mother calling me. So, he drove me home. As I was walking to the door of my house, I saw Louis there. He was talking to my parents. What could he be saying? "Sorry for last night." He better be. I got closer, and I noticed that my parents were angry. My mother said to me, "Get in the house," as Louis ran to his home. Apparently, Louis told my parents that I spent my night at a guy's house. How could he know? He probably stalked us. He is a psycho. I had no other solution than to tell my parents the truth. If I told them that I didn't do anything bad, they still wouldn't believe me. They said to me, "You're grounded." They took my phone and said that I wasn't allowed to go out before and after school. How could I keep in touch with Aaron? I was so mad at Louis. I bagged the door and fell asleep. The next day came. It felt like forever. I was excited to meet with Aaron. We meet up, and I tell him everything that has happened. He said that he wanted to fight Louis, but I begged him not to. Aaron said that it's for the best if he goes and talks with my parents. He insisted. I said, "All right, why not?" I told my mother that Aaron wanted to talk to them, and she asked me to call him for dinner at our house. So, that is what we did. My parents seemed to love him. Well, who couldn't love him? We had so much fun. My mother said that it's okay if I sleep over at Aaron's since his parents are working at night. I was surprised she let me. But I guess they noticed what kind of a guy Aaron is. So, we went to his house. We both could sense that we felt a little nervous. Like something would happen. We started kissing, and then he went, "Are you sure you want to do this?" I kissed him instead of an answer. Things led to another. And we did it. We were closer than never now. I felt safe. We said our first, "I love yous." I love the fact that he was the first one that said it. Even though we are in our teenage years. I know for sure that love will always be between us two. We are excited to see what life brings ahead of us. There's nothing better than being free, young, and in love.
My name is Anna. I am 19 years of age. I was born in Washington. I started my life as a little girl in the city of Washington. My parents moved to Washington a few weeks after they got married. 2 years after they gave birth to me, I started primary education in Washington. After my primary school education, I was enrolled in another high school in Washington. When I graduated from high school, I got admission into a college in Texas. For the first time in my life, I had to live without my parents and live elsewhere. My dad got a good apartment for me because he didn't want me to stay in the school hostel. The apartment was nice. I fell in love with the apartment as soon as I entered. My dad stayed with me for a day before he traveled back to Washington. The next day was the day I was supposed to resume school. I woke up very early, I took my bath and I prepared for school. My dad got me a taxi driver that will be driving me to school and be taking me back home after lectures. As soon as I finished my preparation, I called the taxi driver. He called me immediately he arrived at my gate. I entered the taxi and we drove off to school. We arrived at school at exactly 7:50 a.m. The school was so big that I couldn't find my way to my faculty. While I was figuring out how to locate my faculty, I saw a young guy standing close to a tree. He was talking to someone on the phone, so I waited for him to end the call. As soon as he ended the call, I said hi. He replied and asked if he could help me. I told him that I am a new student. I said this is my first time in school. I said I am a law student, but I don't know where my faculty is. He welcomed me to the school. He said I will enjoy my stay at the school. He said I should follow him because he is also going to the faculty of law. I was very that help was in sight. After all the things I went through, I finally saw someone willing to help. We walked for 2 minutes and he showed me the faculty. He took me to my class so that I can meet my colleagues. When I got to my class, a lecturer was already in class. I stood outside waiting for the lecturer to come out so that I can enter the class. While the lecturer was dictating from his note, he walked to the front of the class. He saw me standing outside and he told me to enter the class. When I entered the class, he asked me if I am a member of the class and I replied in the affirmative. He asked me why I was standing outside. I said I am coming for the first time. I said I couldn't enter the class because I met him teaching. The lecturer told me to look for a sit and settle down. He said I do not have to wait outside when I am late to class. He said no lecturer will send me out of a class because I came late. The lecturer told me to take my sit and he continued teaching. We didn't have any lectures after that class. So, we decided to use the opportunity to know ourselves. The first thing we did was appoint a class representative. One of the teachers was called to help us organize it. He stood in front of the class and welcomed everyone. He advised us to take our studies seriously. He said the first and second years are the most important for a student. He said once a student does badly in his first 2 years, he said there is no way he or she will have a good result. He said once a student can scale through the first 2 years with a good result, he or she will graduate with a good grade. He said having a good grade is a big advantage in the labor market because every organization wants a good and competent worker. After advising us, he went back to the subject matter. He told those that have an interest in becoming the class representative to step forward. 2 female students and 3 female students went forward. The lecturer said it is now in our hands to decide who our class representative will be. He said because we are all meeting ourselves for the first time, he will give the 5 students the chance to sell themselves to the class. They mounted the podium one after the other to sell themselves to the class. After 45 minutes, they were through with their manifesto. The lecturer mounted the podium again. He said the next thing is to appoint our class representative through voting. He said the student that has the highest vote will become the class representative. We were 100 in the class, 95 of us were left to cast the vote. The lecturer told every student to tear a sheet of paper and write the name of their favorite candidate on it. He said after writing it, every student should step forward and drop it in the ballot box. The lecturer told the contestants to mention their names to the class again before the commencement of the voting. The first student stepped forward and mentioned his name. He told the class that his name is John. The second student stepped forward and did the same. He told the class that his name is Patrick. The third student stepped forward and she also did the same. She told the class that her name is Angela. The fourth student stepped forward and did the same. She told the class that her name is Anita, while the last student told the class that his name is Henry. After they mentioned their name, he told us to do as instructed. We all tore a sheet of paper and wrote the name of our preferred candidate. After the vote, the lecturer told one of us to count the vote. After the counting, the lecturer announced the results. He said John had 65 votes, Patrick had 10 votes, Anita had 10 votes, and Angela had 6 votes, while Henry had 4 votes. The lecturer said by vote cast, John has been elected as the class representative. The whole class shouted. Some of the students went to the podium and hugged him. After some time, the lecturer told everybody to return to their seats while the contestants should remain standing. He told the candidates to display the spirit of sportsmanship by shaking each other. After they did that, he told the other 4 students to return to their seats while John should remain standing. The lecturer told John that if he wants to be a successful class representative, he has to take everybody in the class along in everything he does. He said if a lecturer gives the class assignment, he has to make sure that everybody in the class gets the assignment. He said if he wants to submit an assignment too, he has to make sure that at least the majority of the class has submitted. He said the welfare of the class is part of his duties. He said if he does not see any student in class, he has to call that student to know why he or she is absent. He said one of the ways he can achieve that is to create a WhatsApp group for the class. After the lecturer finished his speech, he told John to return to his seat and the lecturer left our class. When the lecturer left the class, some of John's friends went to him and congratulated him again. They took him to the restaurant to celebrate his victory. When I realized that there was nothing left for me to do, I called my taxi driver to take me home. He told me to wait for him in front of the school gate so that he wouldn't bother entering the school gate. I boarded one of the taxis on the campus and I alighted at the school gate. 5 minutes later, my taxi driver arrived. I entered his car and he drove off. I got home around 3 p.m. As soon as I entered the house, I went straight to the bathroom and took a shower. After taking a shower, I ate the food I bought on my way home. After eating, I lied down on my couch and slept off. I woke up around 8 p.m. When I woke up, I walked into my room and continued my sleep. I woke up very early the next day because I didn't want to get to class late. I called my taxi driver before I entered the bathroom to take my bath. I knew he will arrive before I finish my preparation for class. 20 minutes after, my taxi driver called me and informed me that he is in front of my gate. I was still putting on my cloth when he called. I told him that I will join him in a few minutes. 5 minutes after, I joined my taxi driver in his car and we drove to school. I entered my class at exactly 7:50 a.m. Our first lecture was to begin at 8 a.m., so we had little time to gist. John walked to the front of the class and addressed the class for the first time since he was elected as the class representative. He thanked us all for voting for him and he promised to work diligently for the success of all the students in the class. He said he will make sure every information is passed as it when due. He said his first task as a class representative is to create a class group. He passed a blank paper around the class. He said everyone should write his or her cell phone number on the paper so that they can be added to the group. At exactly 8 a.m., a lecturer entered our class, so we suspended what we were doing. When the lecturer ended his class, another lecturer came in. We had lectures until we went for a break. After the break, there was no lecture, so we continued writing our numbers. John created a group that night and he started giving us information on the group. He would tell us whenever we have a lecture or whenever a lecture is cancelled. One day, I received a message from an unknown number on WhatsApp. The message I received was, "Hey pretty, how are you?" I didn't reply because the number looked strange. While I was browsing the internet, the number called me via WhatsApp again. I was reading important content on my phone, so I didn't answer the call. When I finished reading what I was reading, I replied to the message with the hope that it was someone I know. After replying that I was fine, I asked the person who he is and how he got my number. He asked me which of the questions do I want him to answer first. I said he should answer anyone first. He said his name is Nelly. I said I don't know anybody with that name. He said I might probably not know him but he knows me. I asked him where he knew me. He said we are in the same class. I asked him how he got my number. He said he picked my number on the class group. As soon as I heard that, I became very angry. I threatened to report him to the class representative for taking my number on the group without informing me. When he heard that I was going to report him, he started begging me. He said I shouldn't report him. He promised that he won't do that again. I told him that if I see his message on my phone again, I will report him for intruding on my privacy. He apologized once again and promised not to intrude on my privacy again. The next day in school, I saw the lecturer that was in class on the first day I went to school. I was the one that greeted him because he didn't recognize me. He responded to my greeting, but he was still looking at me like he knew me from somewhere. I told him that I was the student that came late to the class on the first day of resumption. I said I was waiting outside when he called me into the class and asked me why I was standing outside. When I finished my explanation, he remembered who I was. He said he hasn't come to our class since that day because he traveled. He asked me how I have been coping with my study. As I told him that I have been coping very well. While I was about to walk away, he held my hand. It was a shocker to me. I was surprised and at the same time, I was afraid. He asked me whether I have a cell phone and I replied in the affirmative. He gave me his phone and told me to type my save my number on his phone. I collected his phone and did as he instructed. I walked away from him and I returned to my class. We had only one lecture after that. As soon as the lecture ended, I called my taxi driver to come and take me home. When he arrived, I entered the car and he drove me home. I was very hungry when I got home. I rushed into the kitchen to prepare a meal for myself. While I was preparing the meal, I quickly entered the bathroom and took a shower. 30 minutes later, my food was ready. I ate my food in the sitting room. After eating, I lied on my couch like I used to. At exactly 9 p.m., I went into my room and slept off. It was my lecturer's call that woke me the next morning. I was surprised to see his call very early in the morning. I didn't want to answer the phone at first, but I thought within myself that he might have an important message for me. When I answered the phone, I respectably greeted him. He noticed that my voice was not as audible as it used to. He asked me if I was still sleeping. I told him that it was his call that woke me up from my sleep. He apologized for disturbing my sleep. I said he doesn't need to apologize because his call came at the right time. I said if he didn't call, I would have been late for class because I will still be sleeping by now. He said if I come to school, I should make sure that I see him in his office before I leave. I told him that I would do that. As soon as the call ended, I started thinking within myself that why will a lecturer want to see me in his office? I concluded within myself that he might have important information for me. When I finished preparing for school, I called my taxi driver. He arrived in a few minutes and he drove me off to school. I got to school around 7:45 a.m. I knew I had 15 minutes before the commencement of the lecture, so I went straight to Dr. Peter's office. I met his door open, but he wasn't in his office. I called his cell phone number to inform him that I am in front of his office. But he didn't answer his call. When I didn't see him, I had no other option than to go to class. 5 minutes later, Dr. Peter returned my call. He asked me where I am. I told him that I was in front of his office when I called him. He said he was in a meeting with his colleagues, which was the reason he wasn't able to answer my call. I told him that I have left his office and I am presently in class. He said he will be in his office by 9 p.m. He said from 9 p.m. I can come and see him in his office. At exactly 8 a.m., a lecturer entered our class. He taught us until 10 a.m. As soon as he left, another lecturer entered the class. We had lectures until 2 p.m. As soon as L left the class, I went straight to the school's restaurant because I was very hungry. After eating to my satisfaction, I called Dr. Peter. When he answered the phone, he asked me where I was. I told him that I am at the school restaurant. He said I can come and see him in his office now. I left the school restaurant and walked to Dr. Peter's office. When I got to the door of his office, I knocked. He already knew I was the one, therefore, he didn't hesitate to tell me to enter. When I entered his office, he told me to sit on his couch. I was surprised to see a very big couch in his office. I sat on the couch thinking why this man invited me to his office. He excused himself and went out of his office. He returned 5 minutes later with a bottle of wine. I told him that he didn't need to disturb himself because I just left the school restaurant. He said it's not compulsory I drink the wine in his office, he said I can take it home. He placed the wine in front of me and sat very close to me. He didn't say anything for some seconds, so I started wondering why he told me to come in the first place. I looked at his face and I asked him the reason he asked me to see him in his office. Dr. Peter said since he became a lecturer, he has had nothing to do with his students. He said he tries to avoid his students. He said my case seems different. He said he began to like me from the first day he saw me. He said he knows what he is about to tell me might sound weird, but it is from the bottom of his mind. Dr. Peter said he likes me and he wants me to be his girlfriend. I didn't know whether to cry or laugh when he said it. It was annoying to me because I knew he will have a wife at home. I asked him whether he has a wife at home. He said he has a wife and 2 kids. I said why he will want to date a young girl like me when he has a wife at home. He said I shouldn't bother about his wife. He said his wife wouldn't know about our relationship. I stood up angrily and walked out of his office. I didn't even bother to call my taxi driver that day because of the anger in me. I used public transport to get to my house. When I got home, I took a shower to relax. After taking the shower, I cooked a delicious meal for myself. While I was in the sitting room watching television, Dr. Peter's call came in. I thought within me whether to answer the phone or not. Before I could decide, the call ended. A few seconds later, he called again. I answered at this time with an angry tone. Immediately I answered the call. I asked him why he was calling me. He said he wanted to let me know that what I did was very wrong. He said even if I do not want to date him, I shouldn't have walked out on him. He said at least he is old enough to be my father. I told him that if he knows he is old enough to be my father, why he would want to date someone as young as his daughter. He became very angry and started ranting on phone. He said he would let me know that he is my lecturer. He said I will suffer a lot to pass his course. He said he has a lot of friends in the department. He said he will do everything to frustrate my stay in school. He said he has come across many stubborn students like me during his career and he has dealt with them severely. He said my case won't be any different. I ended the call in anger. Throughout that night, I was very angry. The next day, I went to school very angry. I got to school at exactly 7:50 a.m. At exactly 8 a.m., Dr. Peter entered our class. He taught us for 2 hours before he left our class. As soon as he left the class, I walked out of the class and sat under a chair that was under a tree. While I was sitting, a young guy in his mid-20s approached me. He greeted me and I responded. He noticed that there was an element of anger in me. He asked what could make a young and beautiful girl like me angry at that time of the day. I told him that I am fine. He said his name is Nelly. I said I do not know anybody with such a name. He said I will remember him if I think very well. I told him that I don't know anybody with such a name. He said he was the guy that sent me a message on WhatsApp some days ago. He said he came to apologize for what he did. I told him that he shouldn't have bothered because I have forgotten about it. Nelly and I began to talk that day and we bonded very well. We talked until the school closed. After the school closed, we went to our respective homes. When I got home, I was the first to send Nelly a message on WhatsApp. I told him to forget about what happened the previous day. I said he can chat and call me anytime he wants. Henry was so happy. He said he wanted to know why I was angry back in school. I told him that his anger was caused by one of our lecturers. He asked me who the lecturer is. I said it is Dr. Peter. I told Nelly that Dr. Peter called me one morning that I should see him in his office. I said I didn't know what I wanted to do for him, but I went. I said when I got there, he told me something irritating. Nelly asked what he told me. I said he told me that he wants to date me. I said when he mentioned it, I walked out on him. I said when I got home, he called me and threatened that he will make sure I fail his course. Nelly asked what I did after that. I said I didn't do anything. I said I have made up my mind to read very well for the upcoming examination. I said I want to see whether he will fail me if I write what he taught me in class. I told Nelly that I was already feeling sleepy. I said we will meet in school the next day. The next day in school, Nelly came to me and told me that he wants to tell me something. He said he doesn't know if I will accept it or not. I said he should say what he wants to say. He said he will like to stay in my place so that we can read together for the upcoming exam. I said that's a good idea. I said reading together will help me a lot. I left school around 1 p.m. that day because we weren't doing anything. None of our lecturers came to class because we have already concluded the topics for the semester. We were all waiting for our examination. 1 week before the exam, Nelly came to my house and we started staying together. We drafted a timetable for our reading. We had 8 courses in total, so we divided them into 2. We will read a course in the morning and another in the afternoon. We were reading one day when I mistakenly saw Nelly's anaconda through his boxer. Nelly's anaconda was very hard. I knew Nelly was thinking about having sex with me. I wanted him to know that I saw his anaconda, so I asked him why his anaconda was so hard. He said he doesn't know. He said it happens to him sometimes. I smiled knowing that he was lying. I moved close to him and I held his anaconda. As soon as I held his anaconda, he dipped his hands in my boobs too. I was caressing his anaconda and he was caressing my boobs. The pleasure was out of this world. After caressing me for minutes, I walked him to my room and we had sex. After the sex that day, we continued to have sex until the day of the exam. On the day of the commencement of our exam, we had early morning sex before we left for school. The exam came and I did my best. I was expecting a very good result because I read very well for the exam. 2 weeks after the exam, the result was out. We received a message from the school that we should check our results on our portal. I was afraid to check. I called Nelly that he should help me check it. Nelly said I should give him 5 minutes. 10 minutes later, Nelly called me. I was afraid to pick the call. When I eventually picked the call, Nelly read my results to me. It was a fantastic result. I did very well in all my courses including Dr. Peter's course. My result was the best in my class. 2 weeks later, we resumed for the second semester. People began to notice me in class. I began to have a lot of friends because everybody wanted me to share my knowledge with them. 4 years later, I graduated from college as the best graduating student in my school. The convocation ceremony was attended by many people. My parents invited a lot of their friends to my convocation. They wanted them to come and see how their daughter made them proud. After the convocation, I left Texas and returned to Washington with my parents. I stayed with my parents for 3 months before I got a job in a reputable company in California. When I got the job, I left Washington and relocated to California. I resumed at the office the next Monday after I traveled to Washington. When I resumed, my first stop was at the office of the chief executive officer of the company. She welcomed me. She told me what the company wants from me and she told me to make them proud. When I left the chief executive officer's office, I was taken to the office of the manager. The manager told me almost exactly what the CEO told me. From the manager's office, I was taken to the office of my direct boss. My direct boss briefed me on a lot of things. He told me my job description, the do's and don'ts of the organization, and the level of performance that is expected of me. After the entire introduction, I was taken to my office. The manager brought 2 ladies to my office.
He said they are my assistants.
He said I should call on any of them if I need anything. Days went by and I continued my job in the company. I made sure that I do all that is expected of me without delay. I noticed that my boss started having an interest in me. I was happy because he is a handsome and caring guy. Most of the time, he takes me on a lunch break.
He buys other things for me aside from food.
I was enjoying his company, waiting patiently for him to say what I wanted to hear. One day, I wore a very sexy dress to the office. The dress was so sexy that my boss had to compliment it twice. My boss used to compliment my dress often, but it was just too much that day. When he kept complimenting me, I knew he was up to something. I was sitting in my office when I saw his call. I hurriedly answered, thinking he has something important for me. He told me to come to his office. When I got to his office, I stood for 3 minutes and my boss did not say anything. After some time, he walked close to me. Once again, he talked about my dress. He asked me if he can kiss me. I said he can. He said he doesn't want an ordinary kiss. He said what he wants is a French kiss. I said I haven't heard of that before and I do not know what it means and how to do it. He said I shouldn't worry, that he will teach me. He said he wants to explain it to me before we start. He said a French kiss is a kiss in which one or both partners use their tongues to stimulate each other's mouths for mutual sexual pleasure. My boss taught me French kiss and we did it. It was an exciting time with my boss. I kept asking for more and my boss was always ready to give me. Hey, guys, please let me know if this is right or if this is what I should do, or please let me have your thoughts on this.
I left my sound at max on the phone accidentally and watched an 18+ video on bath. My name is Jessica. I am 20 years old. I live in Florida. I had a very rough background because my mom died while I was 15 years. The death brought me a lot of pain. 5 years after, I am yet to recover from the death of my mom. I haven't forgiven my dad since my mom died because he was among the causes of my mom's death. The doctors confirmed that my mom died as a result of internal bleeding. My dad was a drunkard. He usually comes home drunk every day. My mom kept telling him to stop, but he didn't. One day, he came home drunk. My mom talked to him like she used to anytime he comes home drunk. I didn't know what came over him that day. He hit my mom. He hit her severely that she had to be rushed to a hospital. After 3 days, my mom was discharged from the hospital, but she was still not 100% okay. She fell sick again, but she didn't go to the hospital early. When she died, the doctors carried out an autopsy on her. The result of the autopsy showed that she died of an internal injury that she sustained when my dad raised his hands on her. My dad was sorry for his action, but the deed has already been done. He was charged with manslaughter, but he was later released after spending 2 months in prison. 3 years after the death of my mom, my dad remarried. He married a woman from Florida. He invited only a few people to the wedding ceremony because he didn't want people to know that he was getting married. I didn't get to meet the woman he married until the night of the wedding when she came home. She came with a 12-year-old boy that has another father. I didn't want to live with them, but I had no option. I graduated from primary school a few days after my dad's wedding. 6 months after, I enrolled in a high school. When I got to high school, I made a lot of friends. After closing from school, I will go to my friend's place. Sometimes, I will be there until late in the evening before I returned home. I was just happy with anything that will take me away from my dad's wife. One day, I came home very late. My stepmom was curious to know where I was coming from. She started ranting in the sitting room that I am fond of going out and returning late. She said I am a small girl and that is not good for me. From the bottom of her heart, I knew her advice was good, but she wasn't doing it with good intention. She intended to spike my father up against me. She continued ranting in the sitting room. She expected my dad to say something, but he didn't. He kept looking at her. When he finished eating his food, he went straight into his room. The next day, my stepmom's son Philip saw me sitting in the sitting room and he sat close to me. At first, I wanted to leave his sight, but I noticed that my dad was looking at me, so I kept my calm. A few seconds later, my dad walked away from the sitting room. Philip noticed that I was waiting for my dad to leave the sitting room so that I can walk away from him. Therefore, as soon as my dad walked away, he started begging me not to leave. I asked him why he was begging me. He said he knows what I wanted to do. I asked him what he claimed to know. He said he knows I want to walk away from him. He said I should not do that. I asked him why I should be sitting with him when we have nothing to discuss. He said he has something to discuss with me. I said he should say whatever he wants to say because I am listening. I was already up from my seat when I was talking. He pleaded with me that I should sit before he can say what he wants to say. For a while, I told myself that I do not need to transfer the aggression in me to him. I thought within myself that he wasn't the one that offended me. I sat as he instructed and I told him to say what he wants to say. Philip started by apologizing. He said he knew his mom went overboard yesterday. He said since his mom came to the house, we have been living like enemies. He said it's not supposed to be like that. He said we are all living in the same house, so we should live like one big family. He said there is no gain in living like enemies in the same house. I sat down for a while and thought about what he said. I thought within me that everything Philip said was the truth. I said to Philip that I understood everything he said perfectly. I said I don't have any issues with his mom. I said I just feel like his mom doesn't like me. I told him that I think that his mom sees me as a threat. He said his mom does not see me as a threat. He said his mom is a very nice woman. He said the issue I am having with his mom was because I have not fully understood who she is. He said once I understand her perfectly, we wouldn't have issues again. He said he would talk to his mom and make her see the need to live as one happy family. He said he knows his mom will listen to him. I told Philip that I don't have any problem with his mom. I said if she is ready to live with me peacefully, I will also live with her peacefully. Philip left the sitting room and went into his mom's room. I didn't know what he told her, but I believed he told her about the reconciliation. 20 minutes after, Philip and his mom walked into the sitting room. I didn't look at her face because I was still angered by what she did to me the previous day. She then sat close to me on the couch and asked for forgiveness. She said she knew we haven't been living as a family since she came into the house. She said she knows that the fault is from her. She said she is ready to make amends and make us live like one big family. I was happy to hear that. I told her I don't have any issue with her. I said she is old enough to be my mom. Therefore, she ought to take me as a child. I said she ought to treat me the same way she treats her son Philip. She said I should forget what has passed and let us start a new chapter. I told her that I heard everything she said. She said to prove to me that she is happy with me, she will cook anything I want for dinner. I told her to prepare what my dad wants rather than what I want. She said my dad doesn't have any issue with shat she cooks. She said my dad eats whatever she cooks without complaining. She said I have to mention what she will prepare for dinner. I told her to cook fried rice and chicken. She said my chicken will be the biggest. She left after I told her what to cook, but Philip remained in the sitting room. Philip and I discussed a lot of things. He asked about my academics and other stuff. He urged me to show him anything that I have been taught in school that I do not understand. At exactly 7 p.m., my stepmom served dinner. She sent Philip to call my dad who has been in his room since morning. When my dad came to the dining, he was surprised to see me eating in the dining with my stepmom and Philip. Before we settled our dispute, I do not eat in the dining. Anytime I am served my food, I either eat it in the sitting room or my room. Another thing that surprised my dad was the way Philip and I were talking while we were eating. My dad was forced to talk. My dad said he cannot understand what is happening in the house. He said whatever it is, he is happy with what he is seeing. He said this is how we are supposed to be. He said we are supposed to be one happy family. My stepmom told my dad that we have settled all disputes and we are now living as one big family that we are. My dad was very happy. He said my stepmom has just made his day with what she told him. He said what he heard calls for celebration. He said we should all prepare to go to the beach the next day. Philip and I screamed when we heard about going to the beach. None of us have gone to the beach before. I have been hearing about how fun the beach is, but I haven't had the opportunity to go. So, when my dad mentioned the beach, it was as if he knew what I wanted. After dinner, we all went into our separate rooms and slept. Philip and I woke up very early the next day in anticipation of visiting the beach. After taking my bath and putting on my dress, I went to check on Philip in his room. When I go to his door, I knocked and Philip answered. Philip said I should wait for him in the sitting room because he is taking his bath. I walked back to the sitting room and sat alone. I put on the television because I was bored and there was no one to talk to. 10 minutes later, Philip joined me in the sitting room. He was looking very handsome. He sat close to me and we watched television together. 20 minutes later, my stepmom and my dad came out of their room. My stepmom was already prepared while my dad was still not prepared. My mom went into the kitchen so that breakfast will be ready before my dad finished his preparation. 20 minutes later, my dad came out prepared. No sooner had he sat down in the sitting room than my stepmom called us to the dining. We ate breakfast as a family. After eating breakfast, we walked straight to my dad's and drove off to Miami Beach. We left home at exactly 10:20 a.m. and we arrived at Miami Beach at exactly 11:50 a.m. Miami Beach is a good sight to behold. It has a beautiful environment. Fun seekers from all over the world were gathered at Miami Beach. We had a lot of fun. Philip and I played in the water. We ate a lot of things that were sold there. The beach was in a carnival-like mood because it was during a public holiday. We ate together and drank together. We took photographs together too. We enjoyed ourselves as one big family. We left Miami Beach at around 6 p.m. We got home around 7:30 p.m. When we got home, we sat in the sitting room and talked about our experiences at the beach. My stepmom did not bother to go to the kitchen because we had already eaten to our satisfaction at the beach. At exactly 9 p.m., my dad left us and went to his room. A few minutes later, my stepmom stood from her seat and walked to her room. Philip and I continued our gist after they left. We chatted until 11 p.m. before we both went to our respective rooms. I was happy throughout that week. When I got to school on Monday, I told my closest friends what happened in our house. It surprised them a lot because they didn't know that my stepmom could be that nice. My closest friend Evelyn promised to visit me by the weekend to have a feel of what our home looks like presently. When I got home on Friday, I told my stepmom about Evelyn's visit. She was very happy to hear that Evelyn was visiting. She said she has a place to go on Saturday, but she will wait for Evelyn's arrival before she leaves. Evelyn arrived at our house as early as 9 a.m. She ate breakfast with us. After we ate breakfast, my father was the first to leave the house. He said he wants to visit his childhood friend Mr. Patrick. He said it's been a long time he saw Mr. Patrick. 15 minutes after he left the house, my stepmom left too. She told us to take very good care of ourselves. She said we should make sure the house is tidy before she returns. When she left, Evelyn and I went to my room while Phillips remained in the sitting room. Evelyn and I chatted for hours. We talked about school, careers, and many other things. At exactly 2 p.m., Evelyn told me she wanted to leave. She said she doesn't want her mom to start calling her cell phone number. I followed Evelyn to the gate. We hugged each other and we waved at each other. When I returned to the sitting room, Philip was still sitting there. I sat on the couch in the sitting room and we started chatting. Philip began to ask me about my friend. He asked me how I met Evelyn and I told him that she is my classmate and my closest friend in school. He asked me a lot of questions about Evelyn and I gave him answers according to what I know about her. The last question that Philip asked that made me realize that he had an interest in Evelyn was when he asked me whether Evelyn has a boyfriend. I said since I know Evelyn, I have never seen her with any man. I said we used to talk about men like girls do, but none of us has a girlfriend. He said what if she has and I don't know. I said Evelyn is my classmate and my closest friend in school. I said there is nothing that Evelyn will do that I won't know about. I said if she has a boyfriend, I will be the first person to know. After I answered him, I asked him why he asked me all those questions about Evelyn. He said it seems he likes her. I asked him if it seems he likes her or he likes her. He said he likes her. He said he wants me to help him talk to Evelyn since we are friends. He said Evelyn will listen to me better than him. I said I will do my best. He promised to buy me a very nice gift if I talk to Evelyn on his behalf. He asked me what I want as a gift. I said I want iPhone 12. He said if I am available to convince Evelyn to date him, he would buy me iPhone 12. As soon as I heard that, I started thinking of the strategy that I will use to win Evelyn's heart for Philip. I didn't want that iPhone 12 to pass me by. The next day in school, I took Evelyn to the school's restaurant during the break. I bought her chicken and wine. After she finished eating the chicken and wine, I told her that I have something important to tell her. Evelyn said she knew something was fishy when I bought an expensive chicken and wine for her. She asked me what I wanted to tell her that made me spend an expensive amount on buying chicken for her. I said I want to tell her about my stepbrother Philip. She asked me what happened to Philip. I said since the day she came to our house, Philip has not allowed me to rest. I said Philip has been disturbing that he likes her and he wants to date her. As soon as Evelyn heard that, she busted into laughter. She said she laughed because Philip saw her that day and he didn't tell her anything. She said if he loves her as she claims, he should have been the one to approach her. I told Evelyn that Philip that I know is very. I said he doesn't have the charisma to talk to a girl. I said that doesn't mean he is weak. He is just like that. I said to Evelyn that she cannot find anyone better than Philip. Philip. I said he is the best she can find anywhere. I reminded Evelyn about the role that Philip played in reuniting our family. Everything I was doing was because of iPhone 12. Evelyn said she has heard what I said. She said she will take her time and decide on what to do. She said she will get back to me with her final decision. I told her that I will be waiting to hear from her. While we were going home on Friday, Evelyn said she will come to our house the next day so that she can see Philip for herself. She said if she sees him, maybe he will be able to talk to her himself. When I got home, I met Philip in the sitting room as usual. I told him that I have talked to Evelyn and she has decided to visit us the next day. I said he should do everything to convince her. I told him that I have done the difficult part of the job. I said what is left is just for him to add to what I have done. I told him that the main thing Evelyn wants is to hear it directly from him. I said if he tells her himself, she will accept immediately. Philip thanked me. He said he will do his best to convince her when she comes too. While I was walking into my room, I kept remembering Philip about his promise. Philip said if Evelyn agrees to date him when she comes tomorrow, I will get my iPhone 12 by Monday. Evelyn came to our house at exactly 11 a.m. on Saturday. When she entered the sitting room, I deliberately excused myself from the sitting room so that I can leave her with Philip. I went into my room and hid behind the door so that I can hear their conversation. 5 minutes after I left, Philip and Evelyn were looking at each other without saying anything. The anger that was in me from where I was watching them couldn't be quantified. After some time, Philip began to initiate a conversation with Evelyn. He started by asking Evelyn about her academics. Evelyn answered him well. Next, he moved to what Evelyn likes and what she dislikes. Evelyn said she likes reading and traveling. Philip said he also likes reading, but he doesn't like traveling. He said he is always afraid of an airplane. Philip moved closer to Evelyn and began the main conversation. He asked Evelyn if I have talked to her about anything. Evelyn told him that we are friends, so we talk about a lot of things. Philip said what he was trying to ask her was whether I have talked to her about him. Evelyn said I have talked to her about him, but she wants to hear it from him. Philip said if she wants to hear it from him directly, then he will say it. He told Evelyn that she captured his heart since the first day he saw her. He said he has seen a lot of girls, but she is so special. He said she is better than all the girls he has been seeing. Evelyn smiled. She said that is how a lot of guys do when they want a woman. She said if they get what they want, they will change their attitude. They would forget about all the promises they made when they were wooing the girl. Philip said he is not like that. He said he is ready to stand by his words till the end of time. He told Evelyn that he loves her and he wants her to become the mother of his unborn children. I could not be more proud of Philip from where I hid. I was enjoying the way he was putting his sentences together. After going back and forth, Evelyn said she has heard what he said. She said she will look into what he said and she will give him a reply as soon as possible. A few minutes later, I came out from where I hid pretending like I didn't hear everything they said. As soon as I entered the sitting room, they kept quiet as if they weren't talking before I came in. After a few minutes, Evelyn told me that she wanted to leave. I asked her why she was leaving so early. She said she has some laundry to do at home. She said she will also help her mom in the kitchen. When she walked out of the sitting room, I followed her immediately. I asked her whether Philip was able to talk to her. Evelyn said Philip told her what she wanted to hear. She said she was very impressed with the way he put his sentences together. She said she likes him. She said she wants to take her time before she gives him a reply. I quickly interjected when I heard that. I said she doesn't need to keep Philip waiting anymore since she claims she likes him. Evelyn left after we talked at the gate. I hurriedly walk into the sitting room so that I can talk to Philip too. As soon as I entered the room, I walked straight to Philip. I asked him how it went. I pretended like I didn't know what happened. Philip said he knows my friend would have told me what happened. I lied to him that I didn't ask her because she was in a hurry. Philip said he was able to express his feelings to her. He said he told her his mind and he hopes she will yield to his demand. Philip said Evelyn promised to get back to him as soon as possible. Before I left for school on Monday, I made up my mind that I will do everything to convince Evelyn so that she can quickly yield to Philip's demand. Since Philip told me about the iPhone 12, I have been dreaming of it. After the assembly, I quickly went to Evelyn's sit so that another person won't sit close to her. As soon as I sat, I started my motive. I told her to talk to Philip as soon as possible. I said she should possibly give him a reply today. Evelyn wanted to know why I was trying to rush her. I said Philip is a good guy and he deserves the best. Evelyn said she will come to our house during the weekend. She said she wants to tell him herself. I was so happy when I heard that. When I got home, I told Philip that Evelyn has agreed to date him. I said she would have called him to inform him, but she doesn't have a cell phone. I told him that Evelyn promised to come during the weekend so that she can inform him herself. Philip said if Evelyn comes on Saturday and says what he wants to hear, I will get my iPhone 12 on Sunday. As soon as I heard that, I started dreaming of Saturday. I would have moved that Monday become Saturday if I had supernatural power. As the days were going by, I was just anticipating Saturday. Finally, the day I was waiting for arrived. Evelyn called me at exactly 9 a.m. that she was on her way. When Evelyn arrived at our house, she met a full house because my parents were still at home. A few minutes later, my dad left for work because he had an emergency. 1 hour later, my mom told me to follow her to the mall to get some stuff. We all left the house, leaving Philip and Evelyn. When we left, Evelyn told Philip what he wanted to hear. After telling him, they had explosive sex. When we returned home, we met them in the sitting room watching television as if nothing happened. 1 hour after my mom and I returned from the mall, Evelyn told me she was leaving. When I followed her to the gate, she told me that she has told Philip that they can start dating. When I returned to the sitting room, I started whispering to Philip about my iPhone 12. At exactly noon on Sunday, I heard a knock on my door. When I opened the door to see who was at the door, I met Philip standing in front of my door with an iPhone 12. I screamed very loud when I saw my new phone. As soon as I collected it, I took it to my stepmom and my dad. They were so happy for me. I didn't know that Philip bought 2 phones until the next day when I was going to school. As soon as I walked out of the gate, Philip called me back. When I went to him, he gave me another iPhone 12. He said I should give it to Evelyn. I became speechless. I was just looking at Philip without saying anything. I was wondering how happy Evelyn will be when she sees her new phone. When I got to school, I told Evelyn that I have a big surprise for her. She wanted to know what the surprise was, but I wasn't ready to tell her immediately. I told her to guess what the surprise might be. She did all the guessing, but she didn't even come close. After some minutes, I brought out my iPhone 12 from my bag. Evelyn became speechless. She didn't see me with an iPhone when she came to our house on Saturday, so she was wondering how I got an iPhone between Sunday and Monday morning. I told her that it was Philip's that gave me the iPhone 12. She was speechless. She said she didn't know that Philip is that generous. I told Evelyn that the surprise I am talking about is not my iPhone 12. After some minutes, I brought out her iPhone 12 from my bag. Evelyn was shocked when she saw me with another iPhone 12. I said this one is the real surprise. I handed the phone over to her and I told her it's a gift from Philip. Evelyn was speechless. She was wondering how she could get a big gift from someone she just started dating a few days ago. We took pictures with our phones. I snapped Evelyn with her phone while she snapped me with my phone. Evelyn and I enjoyed using our phones. We use it most times in school. Most times, some of our friends used to come to us to borrow our phones to snap pictures. Because of that, a lot of pictures were stored on our phones. I was with Evelyn one day when she told me about what happened between her and Philip on the day she came to our house. She told me how she and Philip had sex. She told me how good Philip was in bed. When I got home that day, I wanted to ask Philip, but I cautioned myself. Since then, I have been looking for a way to have a taste of Philip. I wanted to experience what Evelyn experienced. My urge for sex with Philip led me to download porn videos on my phone. I started watching 18+ videos uncontrollably. The next Saturday, my dad and my stepmom attended a wedding ceremony, leaving only Philip at home. Because I was bored in my room, I came to the sitting room to watch television. I did not enjoy the programs on display. Therefore, I connected my phone to the speaker. The videos on my phone were playing one after the other. The speaker's sound was at max. Therefore, Philip heard what was going on in the sitting room. A few minutes later, I left the sitting room to take my bath while the videos were still playing. As soon as I started bathing, I heard the porn video on my phone playing in the sitting room. I had soapy water all over my body, so I couldn't rush out. I hurriedly took my bath and rushed out to stop the video that was playing. When I got to the sitting room, I met Philip. I couldn't say anything. He looked at me surprisingly. Philip was wearing short trousers, so I could see his anaconda. As soon as I saw Philip's anaconda, I remembered what Evelyn told me. I knew it was my time to enjoy what Evelyn enjoyed. I moved closer to Philip and I grabbed his anaconda. Philip didn't resist. You could tell that it was what Philip has been dreaming of. We kissed and romanced each other right there in the sitting room. After 20 minutes of romancing, we went to my room and had proper sex. The sex was explosive. I saw what Evelyn told me myself. After that day, Philip and I continued to have sex until we both got married. Hey, guys, please let me know if this is right or if this is what I should do, or please let me have your thoughts on this.
This story takes us to a 16-year-old girl. Sweet 16, they say. But they don't know that life can be cruel even at that time. What can happen to a 16-year-old to think that life is cruel? Let me introduce myself. I am Anita. I come from the city that never sleeps, New York. Just like New York, I never sleep too. New York can be very inspirational, especially at night. You can't miss the lights. I live in the 10th floor of our apartment, and the views are just crazy. I always nap after school during the day so that I can enjoy the warm nights that New York brings. My favorite part of the day is sitting on my balcony, just like I am right now. I either am writing, watching a TV show, or sometimes I get lost in my own thoughts. My go-to TV show right now is definitely Game of Thrones. Everyone has a guilty pleasure. For me are TV shows and movies. I don't have a specific favorite genre. It simply has to have a beautiful, inspirational message behind it. My favorite part of our apartment is definitely our balcony. I spend the most time there. I eat there. You can learn a lot about the city on your balcony. You see a lot of stuff that happens. A lot of cool people just walking around. I witnessed a lot of breakups between random couples, drunk people passing on the streets. And it's kind of entertaining. Since I spent a lot of my time on the balcony, I almost know every one of my neighbors' stories. You might think that I spy or something, but I don't. I just can't help but stare. I have a lot of vases of flowers that I take care of it. It's kind of becoming my hobby too. I even got some lemons that I can't wait to grow and eat. On my balcony, I am never alone. I have my sweet little one, my cat Bella. I am a dog person kind of type, but dogs are hard to keep inside. Our Bella has been so easy to live with. She is white and fluffy. She is sweet and caring and the best cuddle partner that I could ever ask for. I've had Bella for 3 years. It was a birthday present from my parents. Bella loves to stare out of our balcony too. She has a curious soul. Just like me. Sometimes I feel like we are the same soul but in different bodies. It's like she understands what I say. I hope she doesn't feel lonely. We have thought about getting another kitty, so she can have some company. But we haven't decided yet. Besides my cat Bella, I live, of course, with my 2 beautiful parents. I am their only child, and they always got me feeling special. They feel sorry that they never had the chance to give me a sister. But they could have other children. However, even though sometimes it's hard, I never complain in front of them. My mother's name is Emma, and she is a veterinary. I love visiting her at work and just petting all those beautiful animals. My mother is very gentle and kind, and the animals love her. It's like the animal notices a good soul and feels comfortable. My father, Jim, on the other hand, is a lawyer. His job is more stressful, and I barely understand some of it. There are nights that he comes late at night because he is at his office working. My parents live in 2 different worlds, but still, they get each other so well. I aspire to have a love like theirs. It breaks my heart to think that someday they will get old and that I won't have them forever. We, as a family, try our best to spend time together. We love Sundays. My parents don't work on Sunday, so we always go somewhere and spend time together. Besides my life at home, I also have a life outside of it. I go to school. I am a sophomore. I have one very close friend who happens to be my neighbor. Her name is Sarah. She makes high school easier. We go to school together, and we come back together. She is like a sister to me. Like everyone, I don't like school. But I try my best to study and do good in school. There are a lot of parties that my school organizes. There are times that Sarah and I go there. My parents don't mind, they trust me. I can't lie and say that I never tried alcohol because I did. However, I have never been 100% drunk. I am not the type of person that gets attached to things. Just because I might enjoy drinking at a party doesn't mean that I will continue to drink every day. I know when to drink and when not to. There are times when I buy a pack of cigarettes just because of curiosity. I enjoy smoking sometimes, but I know that I will never smoke it in the future. I have control of myself. When you go to these parties, a lot of stuff can happen if you are not very careful. A lot of my friends that go to my school do drugs. This scares me. Smoking and drinking don't make you cool. But I think that's how some of my friends think. Even though those parties might not be the best idea. I met someone special 1 year ago. I met a boy named Abel. We have been dating for a year now. We met at a party, then we found out that we were going to the same school. Abel is 1 year older than me. We know that we are young and that maybe we won't last. At least that is what they say. But I know that we love each other. Abel is straight out of a movie. He is the funniest person that I've ever met. He is my first kiss. And I want him to be my first everything. He is the reason why I haven't cut my hair for a year. He just loves it. We would go to the cinema and kiss for hours. My parents found out about Abel months ago. So they know that we are together. They respect my choices. And they believe in us. Even my parents were so young once they started dating. So I guess we are all right. Another good thing about New York is that you can wear whatever you want. And none would say a word. It's the city where you can show off your fashion and not be afraid of it. However, even at 16-year-old, life can be cruel and unpredictable. It had been months since I haven't felt like myself. I felt deep inside of me that something wasn't all right. I started not wanting to go out and meet with my loved ones, Sarah and Abel. I didn't have energy for anything. And I just wanted to be left alone. I wasn't eating, and I couldn't even finish an episode of my favorite TV show. This was all of a sudden. I don't know why it happened. Even my cat Bella started to notice it. She would come up at my legs and just stare at my eyes like she asked me if I was okay. But I wasn't. I was meeting up with Abel. But I couldn't even speak. Later, I got informed that Abel had spoken to my parents about this. They all thought that I was going through a depressive phase. But I knew that I wasn't that type of person. However, I decided to meet up with a psychologist since my parents told me to. Clearly, this wasn't helping me since I couldn't even get up from my bed. My parents weren't home most of the time. And I couldn't even go to school. I was home alone. So Abel used to sleep over at my apartment. One night we fell asleep on the balcony talking about our future. We talked about having sex. And we agreed that we would go for it the next time we meet with each other. We were going strong for a year. So why not? On a Sunday night, my mother came up to me and noticed that my head was burning from the temperature. We rushed to the hospital. And that's where the real sad story begins. I don't remember the ride to the hospital. But I remember waking up to a hospital bed. My mother had told me that the doctors made some tests. She said that the tests would arrive the next day and that today I had to sleep here. But I had other plans on my mind. Today, I should have been meeting up with Abel. It should have been our special night. But life works in mysterious ways. I guess. I've had the best sleep since I could remember that night. The next day I woke up to Abel texting me. He didn't know where I was. Last night he went to a party. He thought that I would meet him there. I couldn't help but think about who he was and who he met there. However, I texted and let him know that I was at the hospital. My mother and father seemed so worried that I couldn't understand why. The minute that the tests came, Abel knocked on the door and went in. He was standing near me. And I could hear the smell of the alcohol. He had been drinking yesterday. And I was just feeling jealous of what he could have been doing. The doctor was telling me the results of the tests. But I couldn't understand what was wrong. I looked at my mother's eyes. And I saw some tears. Then all of a sudden, I heard the word cancer. My parents started crying, but Abel and I were just shocked. The doctors said that it would be for the better if we started chemotherapy tomorrow. Chemotherapy, tomorrow, how could my life change in a second? I just wanted to get home, to my movies and to my cat. That night I barely slept. The next day came so fast. Abel wasn't here. He had to go to school. I already felt like we weren't so close. My doctors said that the chemo treatment would last between 3 to 6 months. But I was ready. I just wanted to get over it. I took the first dose of the first day. Can't say that I loved it. My parents took some weeks off of work and were staying there with me. Then, bad news after bad news. So, basically, if you're doing chemo, there is a chance that you're gonna lose weight and hair. Months went by, and things just got worse. My cancer was not getting better. And I was still taking the chemo treatment. I couldn't spend time with Abel or Sarah. And I missed falling asleep with Bella. Abel would come after school. But nothing was feeling the same anymore. I miss everything about my life. I am writing this on my hospital bed. wishing I was on my balcony. The doctor said that it's good if I start and take walks around the city. One day, I decided to do so. As I was getting ready, I noticed how bad I looked. I couldn't even notice myself anymore. I was so skinny, and half of my hair fell down. I was wearing a hat, but it was summer. I decided to go with my mother only. She thought that it would be a good idea if we called Abel. But I don't want Abel to see me this way. I went out and saw what I was missing out on. The sun was out, the world was full of colors. You should have seen the girls on their sundresses out for lunch. I felt like my soul had gotten older. That's when I decided that I shouldn't be your problem, Abel. I knew that I had to set Abel free. I know that he does not love me anymore. I wasn't the same person. I didn't look the same. He always used to say that he loved my hair. Now what? I didn't have any hair left. He should continue to live his life. He's young. I texted him so we could meet and say our goodbyes. That was the last time that Anita had written. She had actually passed that day. The cancer had covered her whole body. Her body's ashes are going to be on her favorite place, her balcony, so her soul can still watch over the beautiful sky of the city that never sleeps.
My mom forgets things. Hi guys. My name is Jane. I am the first child of my parents, who had 2 more girls. I was loved the same way my sisters were loved. And you won't even know that the man I called my dad is not my biological father. Yes, he isn't. I am more beautiful than my sisters, and that people usually had a hard time believing that we were siblings. Only those who knew my history would agree. My mom and dad were 2 young couples who were deeply in love and preparing for marriage. They just couldn't keep their hands off each other. You could not find one without the other. Everyone who knew my father would always tease him because it seemed like my mom had him wrapped around her fingers. I was told that my dad never saw any day as a great day until he spoke with my mom over the phone. He began his day with her, and he ended it with her. My mom was not different at all. It was clear she had given her heart to someone. Suitors who were always coming for her hand in marriage could now see that it was a lost cause because my mother would not give up the man she had ever truly loved for another guy. Everything seemed perfect. Although some elderly folks said that the feelings would not always be there. Everyone admired their love. Some claimed that it would die within the first few years after marriage, and it was only a matter of time before the flame that they felt burning all over them would be put out. My parents cared less about what people had to say concerning them. They were in love, and that was all that mattered. They were convinced that they were meant for each other. They could not wait to get officially recognized as man and wife. My dad knew that although mom loved him, he would only be relaxed when they were married formally because then he could hold her as a trophy in front of every other man in town who was equally interested in my mom. He wanted them to see she was all his. My mom equally knew that getting married to my father meant that she had a right to tell other ladies to stay away from her territory. And so when Dad proposed to her, she readily accepted. If there was someone Dad wanted far away from Mom, it was Julius. Mom was from an average family, the only child of parents who were high school teachers and understood the value of education. They tried instilling moral values into a mom from an early stage. Having a beautiful daughter meant that everyone would want to take advantage of her. This was common. Boys would go after girls just to sleep with them, and when they did, the story got around very quickly. Some girls usually get pregnant, so it was considered a normal situation if you found a girl of 14 years old pregnant with a child. The community was bad, but my mom's parents had no option of relocating since the school where they taught was right in the community. And they were not rich, so they had to do all in their power to raise my mom. They knew trouble lurked around every corner in the streets, especially when you had someone like Julius around. Julius was an irresponsible boy. He was irresponsible in every sense of the word. He came from a family who was known to be the perpetrators of most of the crimes in the community. Julius had irresponsible parents, but he soon overtook them in the race towards being wayward. He detested school. He had no brain for books. It was a sigh of relief when he was finally made to stop school because he had been a thorn in the flesh of the teachers and the school authorities. He fought with everyone, friends, foes, students, and teachers. On one occasion, he had threatened the principal of the school. My mom's parents were his teachers at once, and they did not need anyone to tell them about Julius. They just ignored him like he never existed, And it was to their advantage because they had watched him beat up a making teacher twice his size who wanted to punish him for coming late to class. When his parents were summoned for the 5th time by the school authorities concerning their son's attitude, they started a fight with the teachers there. And Julius joined them in the fight. The school authorities reported the issue to the police department. And that was when Julius was finally kicked out of the school. Julius then made a gang out of the boys living on the street who didn't attend school. He then grew worse. Out of the suitors who came for Mom, Julius was one who she had a hard time turning off. Julius just made it plain that he only wanted to sleep with her. And even though he had gotten about 3 girls pregnant, he didn't seem to care. He only wanted to sleep with Mom so that he could brag about his latest achievements all around the community. He wanted to be the first person who slept with Mom. He kept on making advances towards Mom, which she constantly rejected. When it was noised that Mom was engaged, Julius became furious. He was going to miss all he had been trying hard to get, and worse still was the fact that he was losing it to that. Julius had known Dad since childhood. Daddy was the direct opposite of all that Julius stood for. My grandparents taught them in the same class, and my grandparents loved my dad. They constantly used him as a point of reference to other kids. While growing up, Julius could mess with other kids and get away with it, but he couldn't try such a thing with Dad. On various occasions, Dad had given him a series of beatings, a memory he carried all through his life. And now once again, Dad was about inflicting pain on him by depriving him of his target. I once heard the story of how my father dealt with Julius while they were in their teens. My father has always hated injustice. He was often found defending the weak and defenseless. Julius was fond of bullying everyone, and no one had ever stood up to him until my dad moved into the community. He attended the same school, and was in the same class. My dad is quiet, but that shouldn't fool you. He had a lion in him. On his very first day in school, he saw Julius take the lunch of a poor girl. Since it was his first day in school, and he had no friends yet, he kept looking and trying to see the outcome of the whole situation. After Julius made away with the girl's food, she began crying, but when the teacher came and asked her what happened, she refused to tell him. And that was because she had been warned by Julius not to. Otherwise, she would face more severe pain. Everyone was afraid of Julius. On that day, before school was over, Julius walked up to Dad and told him to always respect him just like everyone else did. My father kept silent. The next day, Julius walked up to my dad and demanded that the content of my dad's lunchbox be given to him. Dad kept silent and continued eating his food. Everyone watched as they feared that Dad was soon going to be beaten up. Julius was furious when my dad continued to eat without even saying a word, so he threw away my dad's food on the floor. My father charged at him just like a mad bull. In a split second, Julius eased on the floor, and my father was on him, feeding him blows. Everyone started hailing my father. It took a while before the teachers intervened finally came around, but it was already too late. Julius had already lost some teeth but retained 2 swollen eyes. They were taken to the principal's office to narrate their account of the story, and that was when everyone in the class spoke up about how notorious Julius had been. Julius was immediately punished and suspended for 2 weeks. And as soon as my father got back into the class, everyone came around him. When Julius returned from suspension, he avoided my dad, and if he wanted to bully someone who knew my dad, he immediately left the fellow. That was how the rivalry and enmity between Julius and my father began. On one occasion, when Dad and Mom were coming from my grandparents' place, they met Julius and his gang. By the way, it was then that Julius got humiliated the most. Dad made it clear to him that he had lost the battle and would never in his life get an opportunity of sleeping with his soon-to-be wife. Mom raised her finger, which showed her engagement ring, and she and Dad turned and walked away laughing. Julius was furious. He was not going to let this one go by just like that. He made a plan, one that would ensure he repaid both Mom and Dad. Their wedding date was fixed, and everything was moving smoothly. However, 2 weeks before their wedding, Mom was raped by a group of armed robbers who invaded her parents' home. Julius arranged a gang to go and rob my mom and her parents. They went with guns and knives and immediately broke down the entrance door. They collected the few cash they could find, and while the gang members were about to leave, Julius said he came to collect something more than cash. He wanted to have a taste of Mom. His gang members tried changing his mind about raping Mom, but he refused, and they couldn't compel him as he was their leader. After he had his way with her, he laughed and said that the pig could have the leftover. That statement gave him away. This tragedy was too much to bear. My mom's parents wanted my mom to conceal the information from her lover so that the wedding would not be called off. But my mom, who was already traumatized by the experience, was not ready to build a home on the foundation of deception, and however, the news will eventually spread. And so she made up her mind to tell my dad about it. And she did. It was not an easy pill for my father to swallow, but he did. He was ready to get married to my mom. He covered up her shame by not informing his parents about what had happened. He assured my mother that his love was stronger than ever, and together, they would pass through this phase successfully. This made my mother's parents love my dad more. My mother found it difficult to become intimate with my dad during the wedding night. Her wound was more profound than they all thought. My dad was very understanding. He did not want to force himself on her. He was willing to help her get through this phase of her life, so they agreed that she would go for counseling. They would both see a therapist. A bigger blow soon struck when it was discovered just a week into the marriage that my mother was pregnant as a result of the assault. They were both distraught. My mother cried her eyes out. This was too painful. She began thinking about aborting the child, but my dad intervened. He was equally hurt, but he did not let it affect his sense of reasoning. He was still going to protect my mom from the world. He made a vow, and he was going to keep it. He promised my mother that he would love the child as though it were his very own, and that is what he has consistently done. It was very easy to detect who was responsible. An arrest warrant was made for Julius, but he fled the scene for a while. Some of his gang members were rounded up, while the rest went with him. He began living the life of a fugitive, going from one town or community to the other. But in each place where he went, he found it difficult laying low, as he often went on a robbery spree just to survive. Before long, he became wanted in several states of the country, and a huge amount of cash reward awaited anyone who would bring the information that would lead to his arrest. It was not long before the law caught up with him. During his trial in court, Julius admitted to the crimes levied against him, and he was sentenced to life in prison. However, while he was being led away, some group of armed individuals attacked the court and killed the judge and 6 officers. Julius escaped and disappeared from off the scene. 3 months after I was born, my grandparents started getting death threats from an anonymous fellow who claimed they would pay for almost taking his life away. It was clear who this individual was. It was Julius. My grandparents were witnesses during his trial, and so when he escaped, he vowed to make them pay. He made several attempts to kidnap me when I was a few months old just to cause my parents pain. My parents then decided that it would be best if my grandparents relocated to a different city. That's why they would be safe from danger. However, today, when do you suppose to travel? Julius and his parents attacked them on the way with guns and ammunition, but they were soon disappointed as a heavy military presence was stationed around specific areas where it was suspected that they would attack. They were a massive shootout, and Julius' parents were killed alongside the gang members. Julius was the only survivor, who once again escaped, but this time around, he was coming for my parents. He knew that he had lost everything, and he was willing to kill every one of us and then commit suicide. His luck equally ran out as police officers were stationed at our home. He opened fire when he arrived but was easily subdued. He was taken into custody. On the final day of his trial, law enforcement agents who were heavily armed were placed everywhere just to make sure there was no way Julius could escape. Investigations showed that it was Julius's patents that masterminded his previous escape. Julius was sentenced to death by hanging this time around. While 2 policemen were led away, one of them got so careless and exposed his weapon, and Julius went for it. He made to shoot my parents before he was eventually shot by an officer. It was a day of relief for individuals, families, communities, states, and the country at large. People could now sleep with both eyes closed. Although my dad was determined to cover up my mother's shame, news of the incident got out, and she was so traumatized to the point that she found it challenging to keep up with things. She easily forgot things. She was always lost in thought. She forgot things almost as soon as she said them. She seemed to always drift apart. This was something I witnessed while growing up. She would often get lost in her thoughts while cooking, that it was not abnormal to see her burn her food at least 3 times a week. There was a time when she drove down to the mall to pick up some items, but she boarded a cab back home. When Dad asked her if the car had broken down, she remembered she had driven herself to the mall. This was a regular occurrence. She would request something and reject it as soon as it came. It was no use getting into an argument with her because she was always right. My dad was patient all through the years. He had helped turn Mom's mess into a powerful message, and they both found themselves counseling young couples who were going through a marital crisis. They often organized classes for these couples at home where they would encourage the couples by telling their own story. This class was tagged Sex, Love, and Goop and aired on Netflix. They were a source of encouragement to these young couples who soon started testifying about how the story of my parents helped them. We, the kids, were never allowed to come close to the area where this meeting was held. But I always found a way to eavesdrop. One couple, in particular, caught my attention. I listened to the lady as she and her husband shared their story. With tears of gratitude to my parents, the lady introduced herself as Miranda. And everyone listened as she talked. I remember that she said to everyone, "Good day. My name is Miranda." As hard as I tried, I never was the little girl that had dreams about her wedding. I just wanted the major stakeholders to be happy for the most part. Let everyone enjoy themselves and have money after the wedding. Therefore, when the situation arose that warranted a privately intimate wedding, it wasn't much of a bother to adjust because the picture of happiness I had did not warrant anything happening. However, as much as I never thought of any preconceived ideas of what my wedding would look like, I knew what it wasn't going to look like. And for the life of me, it was not that my husband and I would have a major issue with consummating our marriage for months. The issue is called vaginismus, and no, I'm not ashamed of it. So please don't help me to be ashamed of what I'm not ashamed of. Vaginismus is more of a mental condition than it is a physical one. So, imagine my surprise when the honeymoon I had pictured was laden with pain, tears, and fatigue. Oh, I cried so hard, because we had fought to get to where we were. People were congratulating us, and we were grateful. But what was this? The pain, excruciating, raised to a power of 1,000. I was in pain, intense, serious, and body-shaking pain. My husband hurt from watching me writhe in pain. What was a lubricant? What didn't we try? A few weeks after, nothing had happened, and I was very tired of hearing "just close your eyes. You're imagining the pain. It's not that hard." I went to a gynecologist at a hospital. On the 26th of January, exactly 1 month after our wedding, I decided to seek medical help. I drove myself to the hospital outside the city. This was my first ever gynecologist visit. I explained to a general physician first, and then I was referred to the CMD of the hospital. I remember walking in head down in shame as if I brought it upon myself. That part does not work again, though. I sat in front of this thick man with no name card or plaque in sight, not on his door, table, or overall. I should have walked away. But I did not because I did not even know what to expect. I explained everything to him in between tears. I felt I could not do anything, no matter how much my husband encouraged me. "How long did you people date for?" he asked, almost eyeing me. 2 years and 8 months, I answered. "So, you people dated for close to 3 years, and you didn't have sex?" Now he was irritated. "No, we didn't." I was smiling, trying to change the topic. "So the rest of us are sinners. Look at it now, 3 years, no sex." His words felt like a dagger in my heart because, at the time, I was already asking God why he asked that we remain sexually pure if the process of deflowering was this painful. This man asked me almost 5 times if I was sure I was a virgin. I answered that I was, except for the sexual abuse that happened when I was a child, which would have sponsored that reality. He went ahead to minimize everything I said, and then asked me to lay on the examination table. After checking the first time, the guy said there's a seal that can easily be removed with his fingers. Brethren, those were the worst 3 minutes of my life. I fell from the table as I ran from this pain. The pain was about to numb my ears and my feet. I screamed, but it came out as muffled groans because tears poured too much. The matron he had sent for had to shout at him to stop. I couldn't drive home after that incident. I had to call my husband to come to get me. Tears didn't stop for almost an hour. I kept crying and crying. At that point, I vowed to encourage premarital sex. As we drove home from that silly doctor, I was very quiet. The tears did not stop. At this time, I wasn't trying to cry. My body just was exhaling. My body knew it had been violated. My husband would have gone to bring the place down, but the issue at hand was more serious to me than getting the idiot to pay. He had told us to try that night, but we could not. We could not even try that week. I bled for about 2 days too. At this point, I was sure that I was going to be an ambassador for premarital sex. God had deceived me. I was going to get him back. Then I called my auntie. She's a top consultant in the country. And long story short, we were in Illinois. University College Hospital. The next week, the professor we saw, oh, what an amazing man, he cried with me, consoled me, and encouraged me when it was time to examine me when I hesitated a couple of times. I started crying on the examination table without anyone touching me. After examination, he prescribed lidocaine and said we should try. But the surgery would be carried out if nothing happened. Thursday that week, I was in UCH for surgery. I was completely put under. I didn't even know when I slept off. They called it digital dilation. My husband was a rock, complete support. My mum could hardly sleep or breathe. Oh, I don't want to go into my mum's reaction. It's too much. The woman was broken. Anyway, after spending the little we spent, and the time, my body was knocked out for 2 weeks after that surgery. I was dizzy for 2 weeks nonstop. The surgery did not work. At this point, I lay on the bed and asked God what I had done to deserve this pain. If it was just difficult, it would have been different. The pain was completely beyond me. It would reverberate underneath my feet, almost numb my ears. It wasn't acute pain or a bearable pain. The professor had told us that if the surgery did not work, we were to return for a procedure where I'd be numbed waist down. And then we'd try given professionals. Chris swore that it would never be him or his wife, so that was a no-go area. When we returned to our base, we both decided to leave it. We were tired. As in, I was exhausted, and we were barely 2 months into the marriage. What was worse, I hadn't even asked God anything. We did everything we had done until that point with our logical calculation. I didn't even consider God. I didn't ask if it was His will. I became desperate and ran to help God. I didn't realize what I'd done until He and I had a conversation, and He chided me gently. I cried. Auntie D and the professor kept calling to find out our progress, and I had to gently tell her to leave it be. My mental health had taken such a hit that I could not even have anyone constantly checking on us. My husband and I decided to enjoy each other. Ladies and gentlemen, penetrative sex is not the only sex in the world. It's not. So, rest very well. I never have and will never support masturbation, but your husband can familiarize himself with you. Hiding can't work. Open up and let the exploration begin. We needed to unlearn the expectation that penetrative sex was the ultimate goal. It is not. Sexual satisfaction is. Find what works for you and do it well. Then came a program called Sex, Love and Goop on Netflix. That was the first time that we encountered this class. We did not agree on many things within that documentary, but our breakthrough came through a procedure on the show. Calculated breathing. I realized that what my body was doing was natural. It prevented me from an antibody, and the reflex action was to close up. When I consciously take calculated breaths before we begin, I allow my body to relax. I also started to have conversations with my mind. This is good for me. This is good for us. He is one of us now. In, out, in again, out again. Slight pain, in, out, deeper, in, out. Like that, we won. Whoosh. God, the first time, it still hurt, but it was bearable. The second time, the pain was more sustainable. And like that, Jesus got the victory. This class has been beneficial to my husband and me. It helped put an end to our misery. By the time Miranda was done with her story, people were emotionally moved. They all applauded Miranda's husband, who stood solidly by her and refused to cheat on his wife. However, my parents knew that specific individuals may question the authenticity of Miranda's experience. And so my mom spoke up. She started by noting that it was not fiction. Medical records back up Miranda's and her husband's claim. My parents made the other couples there understand that there's always a reason behind every problem in marriages. Nothing just happens. They said that there's a reason or cause why people are sex addicts. And there is a reason behind the scene when you see that a lady suffers from vaginismus. They equally paid that when you are married but never satisfied with your partner no matter how she dedicates time for your we time. There's a reason for it. I was listening with rapt attention as they said that when a man, woman does not fancy or believe, have an interest in sex, there's a reason for it. Finally, Dad rounded up the session by saying that a lot of people have passed through one trauma or another in their early lives, that the results are one of the things we see manifesting in marriages nowadays. But it depends on what you do with those things before we say I do or even after you get into the institution called marriage. He said that he and his mom will always advocate for therapy, counseling while dating because of those negative things one might have encountered while growing. From childhood abuse, trauma, and all those to just basically having a different background while growing up. If one is not intentional about who to marry by taking therapy, counseling seriously, it will be a struggle. He quipped that while there are lots of lessons that could be drawn from the story of this couple, He would always recommend that people do their homework before taking this journey of life called marriage. This would go a long way to tackling most issues that could arise. I listened with pride. I was proud of the man that I grew up to know as my father. Although he treated me like a daughter and never for once made me feel inferior to his other children, there have been times when I wished that I had his blood flowing through my veins. I felt ashamed knowing that I had the DNA of a man who would go down in the history of the nation as one of the most terrible men who ever lived. There is nothing that I wouldn't give to change my history. I usually found myself thinking about how my life would have been, how I would have turned out to be if Julius succeeded in stealing me as a child when he wanted to. Would I be this refined young lady that I am today? Or would I equally end up as a criminal who was wanted in various parts of the country? Anyways, I was glad that things just turned out the way they did. The door suddenly opened, and here was Mom looking at me. I was eavesdropping all along, and I knew I was going to get punished. However, I used her situation to my advantage. I told her that I heard her call for me. She wasn't sure if she did, so she let me go. She probably thought that she did but forgot she did. Hey guys, what would you do if you were me and you had a mom who forgets stuff every 5 minutes after she says them? I would love to hear your thoughts.
Hi guys, my name is Anita, and I am 17 years old. I am energetic and passionate about life. I hate to be on the losing side. I have experienced a lot of things that a girl my age shouldn't experience. I can't say that I lack the basic amenities of life. No. On the contrary, I have always had the things I wanted. Some of which were provided to me by my father, others, I was made to get myself by my mother. One could envy me from a distance, but when you come close to me and come into my world, you will discover that all the happiness, love, joy, and care were just an illusion, and my open world is not one you would desire. I had money but lacked the attention of my parents. Yes, our home was broken. I am the product of divorced parents, whose relationship was a mistake on the part of my dad and manipulation on the part of my mom. I stayed with my mom, who never really cared how I was doing except when she needed to use me for her games. My dad would trade anything just to be with me, but my mom kept me as leverage. Dad never knew the real me, and Mom didn't care. I'm sure that if my dad knew what his ex-wife was turning his daughter into, he would fight tooth and nail just to make sure I was taken away from her. Mom had us relocating on a constant basis, and so, I never had a steady life. I never had regular friends. I was here today and gone tomorrow. My academic life was as good as dead. I was no better than a dropout. We had to change schools frequently too, and wherever we went, Mummy made me lie that my dad was dead. This was something I never told Dad. People seemed drawn to me out of compassion. The girl who lost her dad. There was a time when I usually found myself wishing that things were different. As a growing child, I would find myself wishing that I had parents who could see eye to eye. It was just too much for me. I am who I am today because of my mom. And I am not grateful to her. She exposed me to the realities of life faster earlier than necessary. I can clearly remember the first day I saw people having sex. It is a memory I guess I would live with for the resting my life. There is nothing that I wouldn't give to wipe it off my mind. I can vividly remember coming back home from school really tired, wishing I would just for once run into the loving arms of a mother, only to have my dreams broken. I got home that day and found the door locked. Ask went by the window. I saw what I hate to remember. There was my mom used by 2 men. I was horrified at my bones. I couldn't move. I just stood looking with tears pouring out of my eyes. After about 10 seconds, she turned her head, only to find her 12-year-old daughter crying. I ran away. I didn't know where I was running to. I just kept running. I didn't care where I was running to. I just wanted to run away from what I had just seen. I was broken. I was bitter. I didn't know when I finally ran back to school. I would rather stay in school than go home to such torments. I don't know how long my mom looked for me. I don't even know if she ever looked for me, but she came to pick me up after management called her. On our way home, she tried acting nice. I can't remember the excuses she made, but she somehow made me promise not to tell Dad about it when next we spoke. Although I promised to keep the secret, that night, I was broken. Until then, Mom had been like an angel in my eyes. Spotless, a sweet soul. How she could stoop so low to do such a thing was something I couldn't tell. I tried crying myself to sleep because the nightmare was happening with my eyes wide open. I prayed that it would just be a bad dream once I woke up. Very early the next morning, Mom actually started acting like nothing bizarre happened. She seemed like the mom I had known, but no matter how hard she tried, the wound was fresh, and it would take us a long time to heal. That ordeal was the first of many. Soon, she got tired of hiding her shaft deals from me that I got used to seeing various men at our place. Why Mom chose to live that kind of life, I could not tell. When I grew older, I understood why she tried her best to beat poverty. My mom was from a poor background. Her parents were extremely poor. It was so bad that they had nothing but hatred towards her when she was given birth. Her parents hated her for coming into the world. They cared less if she lived or died, and she was usually at the mercy of the good-hearted people of the community. She never knew what it meant to be loved. Although they shared the same house, everyone lived on their own. Her father lived for himself. Her mother lived for herself. Her sister lived for herself. Her half-brothers lived for themselves. Nobody cared for anybody. If anyone was sick, nobody cared. If anyone died, nobody cared. I learned that mom once ran away from her home for 3 days, and nobody cared if she was alive or not. The hatred was too much in the family. It was really a dysfunctional family. The parents had resentments for the children, and the children reciprocated the same gesture. It was regular to find her father fighting with her half-brothers over money, or mom was seen fighting her mom over something trivial matter. Her parents were often heard saying that their biggest regret in life was the failed abortion of all their kids. There was a time when my mom fought with her mother over a man. Her mother claimed that she was now going after her clients. Yes, Grandma slept with different men in the same bed she shared with Grandpa. The fight between Mom and Grandma was nothing new, but the comments made by Grandma fueled the hatred Mom had for her. Grandma told Mom that she would never amount to anything in life. Mom said to her that being nothing in life was better than ending up like her. However, she vowed to be better than her mom. The neighbors were constantly entertained by the family drama. Mom's family was everything terrible you could imagine. It was a jungle, and everyone lived like an animal. The school was not an option for the children because nobody was going to pay, so each child learned to fend for himself from an early stage. Mom was really smart. It seemed as though she was the smartest of all the children. She knew that sleeping with boys who were wallowing in poverty just like her would only turn out bad for her, so she decided to go for those who were better off than she was. She was going to go for the educated and wealthy. She soon started visiting bars and brothels where they were high and mighty patronized. Her game plan was to make a rich client develop emotional feelings towards her, and by so doing, she got him wrapped around her fingers. However, she soon discovered that nobody was willing to form a bond with a harlot, so she decided to take a different route. That was when she met my dad, Tony. Tony was from a wealthy family. He was from a good home. He had me raised with a high level of moral standard, and his parents had lots of expectations from him because he had been given a lot. He had a religious upbringing, and he was never allowed to do the kind of things other kids did. He didn't date girls, he didn't go for parties, he was just made to focus on his career, and he exceeded expectations. As a result of his parents' wealth and influence, he did very well. Tony was now a man, and due to his background, he hardly thought about marriage. He had zero thoughts about dating and getting married. He was into his work. This soon gave everyone around him, especially his parents, concern. They soon began advising him to get married. His company held a party to celebrate their achievements, and his colleagues persuaded him to lighten up and join them at a bar. It was while he was there that Mommy spotted her next big fish. She approached him while he was with his friends, and they happily excused themselves. Mom quickly knew that Tony was a newbie in places like that. He declined the glass of wine she offered him, and when he finally gave in to her request for a dance, Mom had to guide his steps on the dance floor. Soon after the party, Mom took him for an after-party, which led to her becoming pregnant. Dad was full of regret. What was he going to do? How would he tell his parents that he had gotten a girl pregnant outside wedlock? He was scared of aborting the child as he didn't want to put either mother or child in harm's way. His religion forbade abortions. He finally decided that it was best he just got married to her. He took her to his parents, and when they questioned her, she lied that her parents were dead and she had to fend for herself. The marriage took place before the pregnancy became obvious. After the childbirth, he learned he had made the worst mistake of his life. One which could ruin him. Mom resumed smoking immediately after I was born, and her thirst for alcohol couldn't be satisfied. She turned the home into a mess, and even though she would never lack since she was the wife of a millionaire, she was never really satisfied. She kept on going to parties, and while I was still months old. Dad couldn't understand why a mother would be this reckless. It was clear that she didn't know how to love. I guess that you can't give what you don't have. Dad finally decided to get a divorce from her when he caught her sleeping with one of his staff, and he discovered that her parents were still alive with 6 children. It was more than he could take. He cared less about the consequences. After her marriage to Dad, Mom traveled down to the community where her family was staying. Being a billionaire's wife, she went with her car and driver to spite her family. She needed to show her mother that she finally ended up very well. It was the talk of the town. She had changed her name from Rachel to Cindy. She spoke in an accent that was foreign to her community. She threw money in every direction except towards her family. The hatred was deep. Her family was not going to let her be. They traced her down to the city and made several claims about being her family, but she simply told her husband that they were just frustrated beggars who were out to take advantage of other people's success. Tony believed her. However, after so much pestering, Tony decided to give it some thought, and he paid an agent to investigate the issue. The findings were shocking. They were Mom's family. Dad traveled down to the community where they lived to see for himself. The people of the community gave him the history of his wife. Dad was shocked by the bones. Mom always had surprises for him, but now, he had had enough. He drove back to the city in anger, only to find one of his male staff sleeping with his wife. Now nothing would hold him back from getting a divorce. He told his parents, who were in full support of his actions, and the divorce proceedings commenced. Mom got a good fortune out of it, and she was awarded my custody. Something that Dad didn't want her to have. Dad was made to pay her a certain amount every month, which would include Carter for the needs of both mother and child, and he could see me twice every week. Mommy didn't seem to care. She had won either way. She would no longer have to dance around with poverty anymore, or so she thought. Within months, she had squandered the money gotten from the divorce, and we had to live on the monthly allowance. This allowance was never enough for Mom, and so she decided to play her game again and get another prey. This made us go from city to city. This made my claim to not have a father. It wasn't until I was 14 years old that my mother finally forced me to have sex. The men who usually visited the homes where we stayed would often make passing glances at me. They complimented my beauty and would whisper something into Mummy's ears, after which she would nod her head and say that I wasn't ready. When I turned 14, Mom made me follow a young man home. I guess he was twice my age. He was the son of one of her older male friends, and I later learned that the man wanted his son to get intimate with the lady because he heard him say that he was attracted to men. So, when this friend of Mom paid her a considerable amount, she called me and asked me to follow the boy home, and we should both enjoy ourselves. We got home, and I was amazed at the beauty of the house. I had only seen such places in the movies. The servants quickly arranged dinner for the both of us, and we ate in his room. It was clear that everything was new to him as they were to me because I could tell that he was more nervous than I was. We played a bit, and he kissed me. We soon found ourselves trying to make the night a success story for our parents, and we eventually did. When I was driven home the next day, I was really embarrassed by Mom took the opportunity to give me some lecture on sexuality. I watched her glow with pride as she said that I had been initiated into womanhood and that it was a phase every girl must pass through. She said it was a privilege to have had my first encounter with the rich man's son. I didn't even know his name, and I was sure that he didn't know mine. This was how I got introduced to life, and it didn't take long before I became a pro in the area of dating. My mom and I soon formed a partnership. She would have me put the best schools where the kids of the wealthy usually went. I was to identify them and get close to them. Through them, I would then give her access to their father. Mom had no issues making these men fall for her. She was beautiful. Far beautiful than myself. This was how Mom sustained the luxurious life she had so come to know. It was when we moved over to a new city and I was enrolled in a new school that I met Pete. Pete was a charming guy, but he was not really my type. He was naive in every sense of the word. I played the pity game and got the empathy of the class. Pete was moved by my story. He never knew that I was moved by his father's wealth. He was an excellent combination of intelligence and wealth. I soon had Pete solving problems for me, academic and financial difficulties. I had learned to be manipulative, just like Mom, so I had no issues making Pete think I was genuinely interested in him. Mom would always warn me not to lose focus or get attached to any guy because we were not going to stay at a place for long, so I had never had a serious relationship with anyone. I don't even remember a time in my life when I had feelings for a guy. I was just taking them for a ride. Pete soon invited me over to his house. He had wanted me to meet his dad. When I arrived, the dad was still busy and Pete and I just sat at the lounge talking. When he finally came to join us, I was overwhelmed by his presence. He had such charisma and confidence that every lady would want her man to possess. When I saw him, I almost doubted the fact that Pete was his son because he was way handsome. His light baritone voice carried with it such authority that made his servants loyal. When he came, Pete immediately introduced me to his father, Mr. Xavier. I was smitten. I watched his whole body as he talked. He was the complete package. He asked about me, and I talked about myself. I gave him the usual story that I had given everyone else about my dad being dead and my mother working hard to make ends meet. They all bought the story. Everything went perfectly that night. After dinner, Mr. Xavier asked that his driver drop me off. I wasn't pretty sure that I had impressed him that night because he seemed to pay little attention to me. However, I looked forward to coming over again, not seeing Pete, but seeing his dad. Mr. Xavier. However, although I was intrigued by him, I knew that the story concerning his escapades with ladies could be true because he never seemed interested in my mom when I spoke about her. Mr. Xavier was an oil magnate. He never remarried after the death of his first wife, who died during childbirth. He wasn't ready to settle down with any lady because he knew that they only came around because of his wealth. Losing the woman whom he had struggled with was really painful for him. His wife was everything to him. His success story would never have been written if not for her sacrifices. She was his motivation. She saw things in him which nobody ever saw. When he was starting up, things were not very smooth, but she stuck with him, and she gave him every support which he needed. He was really a mess, but she fixed him up. He was scared that she could leave him at any point in time because she had the opportunity to ditch him for more affluent guys, but she always reassured him of her undying commitment towards him. It was clear to Mr. Xavier that his lover was an angel sent to him from up above. He owed her his life. His life was now worth a lot simply because of the investment she made in him. He proposed to her as soon as he could afford a ring, and although she had no reason to say yes, she did. She was willing to risk her life for him. After they were wedded, she further intensified her efforts towards the growth of his company, and 5 years into the marriage, he was already a billionaire. That was when she became pregnant for Pete. Mr. Xavier was so happy when he got the news of her pregnancy. They were finally going to get an addition to their family. He made plans for them. He put things in place for the delivery. He actually got his wife a surprise house and a private jet just to say thank you. It was, however, a sad day for him when he was told that she didn't make it. He felt terrible. It was as though his world had just crumbled. He experienced a kind of pain that he had never known in all his life. He felt empty inside. His wife had just left a space that would be impossible to fill up by anyone else, and although he found consolation in the child which she left behind, he made a vow not to remarry. He knew that he would have a hard time finding a lady who wouldn't love him because of his money. A few months to his wife's demise, he began visiting clubhouses, and that was where he slept with a lady who claimed to be pregnant for him. He wasn't going to make the mistake of getting married to this harlot. That was a mistake a friend of his had made years back. He, however, took care of the lady who claimed to be carrying 2 children on the inside of her. He made sure she was comfortable and lacked nothing. He was willing to accept responsibility and take care of them all, but it was soon discovered that the lady had been lying all along. The pregnancy test was positive, and she did have twins, but they were not his. Although he didn't send her to jail for extortion, he quickly took back the car and house that he had given her. This further strengthened his resolve to be on the lookout for women. A week after I had met Pete's dad, I fell ill and missed school. This was our plan to get Pete to come to visit, and he did. When he arrived home, Mom quickly made him feel comfortable. She was good at that. Pete immediately fell in love with her personality. She was giving the love of a mother which he had never known or experienced. All through his stay, I was eagerly waiting to hear him say that his dad sent regards to me, but he didn't. While looking at him talk or laugh, I could only think about his dad. What was happening to me? Why was I falling for his dad? This was the first time in my life that I would really be interested in someone, and it just had to be my boyfriend's dad. Pete gets home feeling overwhelmed by the love shown by my mom. It told his dad all about her. She lit up a spark in him that his father had never seen since he was born. It wasn't surprising when Mr. Xavier invited Mom and me for dinner at his place. We knew that our plan was making progress. The day finally arrived when we were going to meet with Pete and his dad. I was eagerly looking forward to it because I wanted to see Mr. Xavier again. Mr. Xavier sent his driver to come and pick us up at about 7 p.m. We arrived at their home, and everything was well placed. We were led to the sitting while we patiently waited for our host to show up. I watched Mom feast her eyes on the eloquence of everything. Not even her billionaire ex-husband had such taste. I could read her thoughts from the look on her face. This was a big fish that would take a lifetime to consume. I knew that she was already playing a scene in her head where she would wake up in that house and boss the servants around. Before long, one of our hosts arrived. Pete. He was smiling and happy to have us around. I was sure he would have a nervous breakdown if he knew that he was expected but not wanted. I watched Mom put up a fake smile. It always baffled me how Mom could play different characters at once. How could she be good one time and bad the next? Mom was a wonder. While we were all seated and getting comfortable, I had the familiar voice that I was longing to hear. It was Mr. Xavier. His perfume filled the air. Our attention was immediately shifted from son to father. We all stood up to greet him, and he seemed impressed. He invited us to the dining table for dinner. Mom and I were blown away by the kind of service his staff rendered. Mom avoided every topic that would lead to her ex-husband, which we claimed was dead. She acted hurt by the painful memories of the past when Mr. Xavier asked about her husband. I don't know how she did it, but tears just flowed out. I almost believed that they were real. This woman never ceased to amaze me. Mr. Xavier felt bad that he had asked her about the past she was trying hard not to remember. He personally understood what it meant to lose someone you loved. He had had the same bitter experience. He apologized to Mom for making her uncomfortable, and Mom simply played the victim. We never wanted the night to come to an end, but it did. I was not particularly glad that Mr. Xavier and Mom spent most of the time together. That night was the beginning of another adventure for us. Mr. Xavier frequently began inviting us over to his place at weekends. He would sometimes persuade us to spend the night at his house. Mom had warned me not to get intimate so quickly with Pete so that I didn't appear like the cheap girl that I already am. She equally didn't give Mr. Xavier easy access. This made him all the more interested in her. She didn't seem like other women. She rejected his cash gifts and even turned down his offer to buy her a car. She didn't seem interested in his money at all. She always wanted things put in order, and I was amazed at her meaningful contributions to discussions centered on the oil and gas sector. I repeatedly asked myself how a lady who had never seen the four walls of a classroom had such knowledge. Her charm was finally catching up on Mr. Xavier, who saw more of his wife in her. The closer the holidays came, the closer Mom and Mr. Xavier became. I had no other option than to stick with Pete. I guess a bird at hand is worth more than 1,000 in the bush. When the holidays arrived, Mr. Xavier suggested that we go for a vacation somewhere in the Maldives. The Maldives is a living wonder. It was a sight to behold. We saw things we never knew existed. We visited places, went fishing, and partied. This was the kind of life that Mom desired, and we were living it. Everything was just perfect, even though I still wished Mom and I could trade places. I wished that she could settle with Pete while I would be left with his dad. It wasn't their first time coming there, though. Almost all the staff was well acquainted with Mr. Xavier and Pete. They looked at us as though there were others who had been in our position. Well, it didn't matter to either of us because we were occupying the position now, and we were not going to leave anytime soon. It was on our second day there, while Pete and I were taking a walk, that I discovered how deep he had fallen for me and how deep his dad had fallen for my mom. I listened with a grin on my face as he told me that he had never felt this way in his entire life. He confessed to me that this was the first time he was feeling complete. He said that this was the first time he actually knew the joy that came from a whole family. He then told me about his birthday that would be coming up in 2 weeks. It was going to be celebrated at home with most of his father's colleagues and friends present for the occasion. He said that all he desired for a birthday present was to move in with them permanently. I was glad that we had gotten this family, but I somehow felt bad because I knew that this chapter would soon come to go close, and they would be negatively affected once we left because they sincerely loved us. I then told him not to make decisions or wishes like that because his dad may not be in support of it. Although I knew that his dad wanted a relationship with my mom, I told Pete that his dad may just want to have both families as friends and nothing more. At that point, he told me what I never saw coming. Pete said that he has never been this way with any woman before. His dad always came alive when my mother was around. Pete said that he overheard Dad telling his friends that he had found a span just like his ex-wife and he was going to propose to her during my birthday celebration. This was it. We were almost there. I couldn't wait to tell Mom even though Pete told me not to. This was good news. When we got back home, I broke the news to Mom, and she was overjoyed at the prospect of becoming a billionaire's wife once again. Life had finally given her a second chance, and she wasn't going to take it for granted. She wasn't going to let anyone, not even her family members, ruin this golden opportunity. She would never go back to her community to show off. Mr. Xavier told Mom about the birthday party and asked that we both be present. He had a popular designer design a dress for her, which was worth $10,000. Mom and I showed up that day. We actually came earlier than most guests. Mom pretended as though she never knew what was set to happen. She was an actress indeed. While my mom was going through the guest list, her reaction suddenly changed. She immediately had us sneak out of place. We picked a cab and drove home as fast as we could. Once we got home, she asked me to pack up my bags quickly because we were relocating. I was surprised. Why should we migrate to another city now that everything was beginning to fall in place? As we boarded a train, she told me that the third name on the list of guests was Mr. Tony. My father. I knew that this meant that I would never see or hear from my boyfriend, whose dad I fell in love with. Hey guys, what would you do if you were me?